Chapter 439. The pieces come together. Last chapter for Sunday. When the old man heard Lin Feng, he remained silent. What could he say in this situation? It was exactly as Lin Feng described it, and now the old man's life was in Lin Feng's hands. Is there any possibility of a negotiation? Asked the old man while looking at Lin Feng. No, there isn't, replied Lin Feng without any hesitation while shaking his head. When you were in the position of power, you humiliated me and played with me as if I was nothing. You wanted to take my life and humiliate Meng Qing. Now that I am the one with power, do you really think that I will be merciful and spare your life? When the crowd heard Lin Feng, they sighed. Indeed, everybody had seen how the old man had treated Lin Feng. In the illusion, he had prevented Lin Feng from meeting Meng Qing. Lin Feng wasn't able to enter the room where Meng Qing and Shi Qiong were fighting. Besides, after the illusion stopped, Lin Feng and Shi Qiong started fighting. When Shi Qiong seemed to have the advantage, the old man hadn't intervened. When Chu Zhanpeng joined the battle and attacked Lin Feng by surprise, the old man didn't act. The old man only took action when he saw that Shi Qiong was about to die. He was playing with Lin Feng the entire time because he was supporting Shi Qiong. The situation had now drastically changed, and at that moment, Lin Feng had the power. The old man's life was in his hands, so would he let the old man live? Impossible. The old man sighed. He felt regret from the bottom of his heart, but there was no cure for regret. I hate my own foolish actions. I thought about the gains from interfering with a rising genius. Unfortunately, I was just fooling myself, sighed the old man. He then slowly closed his eyes and said, "Let me die in peace." "All right, I will give you that." Lin Feng slightly nodded and raised his hand. A black flame started to burn. It released threads of deadly energy into the air. Lin Feng's hand shook and the grim fire landed by the old man's heart. In a flash, the deadly energy spread across the defenseless old man's chest. The old man's facial muscles twitched, and immediately after, his head fell limply towards his chest as he stopped moving. However, the grim fire continued burning his body into nothingness. A cultivator of the 5th Xianqi layer was dead. And on top of that, he was sent from the imperial city. The crowd sighed. Just how many strong cultivators had died today? Ling Tian, Shi Qiong, Chu Zhanpeng, Chu Qing, and the old man. These were only the few that were killed by Lin Feng. The fire kept burning across the old man's body as the colorful ribbons returned to their owners. At that moment, a ring which was diffusing pallid lights appeared in the air in front of Lin Feng, which surprised him. Lin Feng stretched his arm out and grabbed the ring. The old man had broken through to the 5th Xianqi layer and was from the imperial city. There were probably lots of treasures and wealth that had accumulated over a long time in that ring. After that, Lin Feng turned around and looked at the mysterious woman. He looked perplexed. He still didn't understand why she was helping him. And why did he have the same feeling of closeness whenever he looked at her? "Do we know each other?" asked Lin Feng again while looking at the mysterious woman. Lin Feng's intuition was telling him that there was a connection between them. When the mysterious woman heard Lin Feng, she started to tremble. She could walk through the sky, look down upon the earth. She could raise her hand and kill thousands. But she was unable to remain calm in front of Lin Feng. Lin Feng's indifferent and emotionless voice when speaking with her made her bite down on her lips. She wanted to shout the truth from the top of her lungs, but she didn't know what to say. Could she tell Lin Feng that she was his mother even though she hadn't seen him throughout the entire 18 years of his life? Lin Feng was waiting for her answer, but she remained silent. The people who understood their story were sighing. The woman was also sighing. Everything was about to change. "She's Lin Hai's wife and you ask her if you know each other?" A shout suddenly interrupted. A few people sighed. Nothing could change what happened in the past. That was the truth of the matter. That sentence made Lin Feng's heart start to race. Lin Hai's wife. A sharp and cruel light filled Lin Feng's eyes. The one who had just spoken was Yu Qingshan, the head of the Yu clan. What the hell is going on? Lin Feng's thoughts and feeling were completely chaotic. A moment ago, he had guessed that this woman was the owner of the lovesick forest, and last time, Duan Xinyi had told him that the person was a beautiful woman from the Yu clan. She was the most dazzling female cultivator of Shuiyu. But she eventually cut ties with the Yu clan. In other words, it was also possible that she was related to Yu Qingshan. When Yu Menghe saw Lin Feng's expression, she nodded slowly in agreement. She put her hand on her bamboo hat and threw it away. The bamboo hat flew away on the wind and the mysterious woman's face appeared. She looked pure, delicate, and soft. She had arched eyebrows and an oval face. Her beautiful eyes were filled with tears and her face had turned red. She still looked tender and soft, but there was something more. She looked sad. Meng He, you haven't changed at all. Yu Qingshan's silhouette flickered and he rose into the air. While looking at that woman's face, he couldn't help but sigh. Yu Meng He looked at Yu Qingshan. She was extremely puzzled. If Yu Qingshan had stood by her and agreed for her to be with Lin Hai, none of this would have happened. You have changed, your hair is now white, said Yu Meng He in a low voice. It was impossible to see her thoughts from her facial expression. Indeed, I am old now. I might die soon, but even now, you still refuse to call me father, said Yu Qingshan, who had mixed feelings. He loved his daughter and he was able to see her again, but they were no better than strangers. Her father. Many people didn't know that Yu Meng He was his daughter. When they heard that, their hearts felt uneasy. Yu Qingshan was saying that Yu Meng He refused to call him father, so she must be his daughter. Yu Meng He, 18 years ago, used to be the most outstanding female cultivator in the country. Many people found themselves excited when they recalled the story about the events 18 years ago. So that's it, the incredible female genius who had amazed Shui Yu 18 years ago was his daughter. Besides, it seemed like Lin Feng was Yu Meng He's son. So wasn't he also Yu Qingshan's grandson? He had the heavenly dragon spirit, the spirit of the Yu clan. Everything was becoming clearer. Lin Feng was also starting to understand everything. Lin Feng had the blood spirit of the Yu clan, and was the head of the Yu clan's grandson. Call you father? Yu Meng He frowned and then said coldly, do you think that you have acted as a father? Yu Meng He's voice was filled with resentment. She was blaming Yu Qingshan for everything that happened, which left him speechless. Everything I've done, if it wasn't for you then it was for the Yu clan, replied Yu Qingshan. He looked troubled after hearing Yu Meng He's words, but he replied with a clear conscience. So you still think that what you did was right for the Yu clan? And right by me? Yu Meng He was looking at him like he was pathetic. She smiled coldly and said, so what do you want? Why have you come over to me? When Yu Qingshan heard her words, he was surprised. He always thought that he had made the correct choice, but Yu Meng He, from beginning to the end, never changed her view. They were both alike. Neither would admit if they had been wrong. When there was a large disagreement between a father and his daughter, it was difficult to solve it. Lin Feng was standing between them, unable to calm down. His heart was drumming in his ears and his thoughts were beyond chaotic. He was trying to remember Duan Xianye's story about what happened 18 years ago with the 4 geniuses, but he never paid it much heed. Amongst those 4 geniuses, 3 of them had fallen in love with the 4th, the most outstanding female cultivator in the country. After that, Zhuge Wuqing gave up his pursuit and the beautiful woman had chosen the man who had no family or influence. In the end, the one from the imperial clan was angry at Yu Meng He and her lover. So he sealed her lover who wasn't famous and forced him to leave the imperial city. The imperial clan, the sealed doors. Lin Feng's heart was racing. He suddenly remembered that his father had a black mark on his body. It was a sealed door. The outstanding yet unknown cultivator, who had amazed the country 18 years previously. The one left with a sealed door on his body, was his father Lin Hai. All the pieces were starting to come together. Lin Feng would have never thought that the story that he had heard by chance was hiding such a big secret. It was the story of his parents. Chapter 440. Satisfied. Monday's chapter. When Lin Feng looked at that beautiful woman, he had the impression that he must be dreaming. That beautiful woman was his mother. She was once the most beautiful woman of Shuiyu, and she definitely deserved that title. 18 years later and she still looked so beautiful, graceful and elegant. What must she have looked like 18 years ago? She was probably even more beautiful than one could imagine. Yu Qingshan sighed. He was looking at Yu Meng He while remaining silent. He then looked at Lin Feng. He wanted to say something, but didn't know what to say. In the end, his silhouette flickered and he moved back down and returned to the Yu clan. Yu Meng He stopped looking towards Yu Qingshan. She then looked at Lin Feng and nibbled on her lips. She said in a low voice, "Little Feng, you've been suffering for 18 years. Lin Feng opened his mouth and then closed it as nothing was coming out. Even though he had arrived in this world a few years ago, his soul had already fused with that of the real Lin Feng. He was part of the old Lin Feng and the old Lin Feng was part of him. He was unable to forget the memories of his previous self, therefore seeing that woman, who gave the impression of a strong yet elegant woman, who seemed to care so much about him, was very strange to him. It seemed like that slim and graceful woman was his mother. Lin Feng smiled wryly for a while and took a deep breath. The Lin Feng who was originally from this world had already died. It was useless to continue thinking about it. He was himself and he had to live for the present. There may have been two in the past, but now there was only one Lin Feng. He had to live his life the way he wanted to. He wanted to make those close to him happy. Above the water of the lake, which had tints of red from the blood, there was a proud genius Lin Feng. Mother. A magnificent and radiant smile appeared on Lin Feng's face. After all the chaos in his heart, he felt like he had been reborn. This could be a new start. He suddenly felt like he had become more mature. He understood many things about himself and his past self. Lin Feng was also more detailed in his way of thinking. Being called mother caused Yu Menghe to be speechless. She was standing in the moonlight which illuminated her beauty, as well as her radiant eyes. Tears had begun to form on the corners of her eyes. She had been waiting to hear these words for 18 years. During those 18 years, she wanted to hear Lin Feng call her mother, with all her being, and finally, she had the chance to hear the word she had always dreamed of. When she heard Lin Feng call her mother, all her sadness washed away and she was overcome with happiness. She had done everything during these past years for the sake of Lin Feng, and now she felt like all the suffering was worth it. Yu Menghe moved over to Lin Feng and put her 2 hands on his face. She couldn't help but gently caress her son's face. Her son wasn't any weaker than her when she was at his age. Lin Feng was a genius when it came to swords. She was proud of him. She was deeply gratified in her heart. I just wanted to scream at all those fools. How in the world could my son be a piece of trash? Yu Menghe laughed and gently caressed her son's head with a magnificent smile on her face. It seemed like she had been keeping tabs on Lin Feng for the last 18 years and knew that people would call her son a piece of trash. But by relying on his own efforts, Lin Feng had risen to the top. If Lin Feng hadn't been extremely strong and didn't have extremely high natural abilities, she might not have been able to contact her son. If he hadn't been strong, he wouldn't be a free man. If Lin Feng had been a worthless cultivator, she would have rather let him live an ordinary life and not get involved with the world of cultivation. Even if he wasn't outstanding, he could at least have a happy and tranquil life. That had always been Lin Hai's thought. It was agreed between Lin Hai and Yu Menghe. Therefore, Lin Hai never tried to force Lin Feng to cultivate. He wanted him to have the chance at life as an ordinary person. But after that Lin Feng displayed his talent, Lin Hai knew his son wasn't ordinary. He decided to let Lin Feng leave home and create his own path. The result of his actions was a complete success. Lin Feng was proof. Lin Feng had come to the imperial city and relied on his own talents to accomplish a great deal of meritorious acts, which made him the stuff of legends. At that moment, Yu Menghe and Lin Hai had discovered that Lin Feng had started to walk a very straightforward path. But no matter what path Lin Feng chose, his parents would silently and secretly guide him until they could meet again. Until that moment, his mother was always secretly monitoring him. Many people had thought that her son had no influence and no powerful backers. They thought that they could bully him, harass him and try to kill him without worrying about an outside force. How could Yu Menghe let those people get away with that? She had shown herself and she was announcing to everybody that Lin Feng was her son. She wouldn't tolerate anyone trying to bully or kill her son. Who would dare say that Lin Feng was trash with her around? When thinking about those things, Yu Menghe glanced at the crowd with a cold glare and spoke. A moment ago, so many people were saying that my son needed to die and that they wanted to kill him. Come out and show yourselves, I dare you to say it again. Yu Menghe's words stupefied the crowd. A moment before, the Yu clan, the Dugu clan, the Wanshou sect, the Haoyu sect, the Luoxia sect, the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, etc., had all said that they wanted Lin Feng dead. But at that moment, when Yu Menghe was glaring at them in such an ice-cold way, they could only shake and shiver without saying a word. Nobody dared to say anything because nobody knew how terrifyingly strong she had become after 18 years of seclusion. Perhaps Yu Menghe had already become stronger than the head of the Yu clan, Yu Qingshan. On the path of cultivation, seniors passed their innate talents on to the next generation, and the next generation was expected to surpass them with time. Everybody was silent. Yu Menghe smiled coldly and said, "You're a bunch of worthless cowards, you don't even speak when I am here. If anyone attempts to harm my son, I, Yu Menghe, will annihilate them." When she finished talking, Yu Menghe suddenly released a monstrous deadly energy which rolled across the sky and suppressed the entire crowd. Many people couldn't breathe under such a heavy pressure. What a terrifying pressure! Many people looked glum, especially those who had a grudge against Lin Feng. Yu Menghe was too strong, that pressure alone was choking them, and it was only a warning. It was a guarantee that she, Yu Menghe, had the power to enforce her words. Besides, the crowd knew that if they offended Yu Menghe, they would also offend someone else, Zhuge Wuqing. If anything happened to Yu Menghe, the Yu clan would definitely intervene. Humph. Yu Menghe groaned coldly and said, "This so-called genius competition is pointless. A great majority of you are nothing but corrupt and despicable people, who have no principles. I will be watching you in the future. In a short while, the people from the empire will arrive. At that time, I am convinced that they will pick out the most outstanding geniuses themselves. They have eyes. They will know with a glance what kind of trash you people are." When she finished talking, she looked at Lin Feng and said, "Little Feng, this competition is over, let's go." "All right," nodded Lin Feng. Yu Menghe and Lin Feng's silhouettes flickered, and they instantly arrived next to Meng Qing. Yu Menghe glanced at Meng Qing and smiled. The crowd was dazzled by the two beauties. Yu Menghe was named the most beautiful woman in Shuiyu 18 years ago, and she was still extremely beautiful. Then there was Lin Feng's lover Meng Qing. She looked holy and pure, like a celestial being. Yu Menghe and Meng Qing standing next to each other was too beautiful. The rest of the world lost its beauty in their presence. But those two women weren't in the same generation, so there was no use comparing between the mature one and the young beauty. Meng Qing was Lin Feng's woman and was therefore Yu Menghe's daughter-in-law. How could there be competition between them? When Lin Feng saw Yu Menghe and Meng Qing look at each other, he still felt extremely nervous. In his previous world, this would mean that the mother-in-law was sizing up the daughter-in-law. Lin Feng wasn't the only one who was nervous. Something very rare happened at that moment. Meng Qing had a nervous expression on her face. When she saw that Yu Menghe was sizing her up, she lowered her head shyly. "Yu Menghe, Meng Qing. It's interesting that you both have the character Meng in your name." Yu Menghe continued to stare at Meng Qing and then said while laughing, "My son is a smart young man." Lin Feng was surprised. Yu Menghe glanced at Meng Qing for a few seconds, and then said a few words to break the awkward silence. Lin Feng was speechless as he smiled wryly. Meng Qing, who was still lowering her head, had a magnificent smile on her face. Yu Menghe was Lin Feng's mother, so Meng Qing needed her approval for Lin Feng and Meng Qing's relationship. It was extremely important to her. Chapter 441. The Crown Prince. Tuesday released. The light of the full moon was still shining down on the lake, but light was starting to form on the horizon. The water of the lake was still calm. It seemed like the light from the horizon was growing more and more intense. At that moment there was nobody fighting above the lake any longer. Yu Menghe and Lin Feng had already left. After they had left, the people around the lake remained silent. Nobody knew what to say. Some people were still digesting the shocking events they had encountered that night. Lin Feng had caused everyone's hearts to race. He had shocked everybody from the beginning to the end. First, he released a terrifying, deadly energy which he formed into a sword. He then revealed the power of his Black Lotus. He killed Ling Tian, he killed Shi Qiong. He killed Chu Qing and Chu Zhanpeng. So many extremely famous cultivators were dead because of Lin Feng. Lin Feng had achieved a miracle. When facing a strong opponent, he would show more strength. It seemed like no matter how strong his opponent was, he always had another hidden trick to deal with them. At the same time, Yu Menghe had finally revealed herself. She was the daughter of Yu Qingshan, the head of the Yu clan. 18 years ago, she was the most beautiful and most outstanding female cultivator of Shuiyu. She was one of the 4 strongest cultivators in the country. Everything about her amazed people. Yu Menghe was truly gifted. After having stayed in the dark for 18 years, she had finally revealed herself, for her son Lin Feng. Just like 18 years before, she was still as amazing, as dazzling and as graceful as ever. She was also extremely talented when it came to cultivation. Lin Feng definitely shared her talent. In Lin Feng's veins was the blood of the Yu clan. Thanks to that, he had the heavenly dragon spirit of the Yu clan, the heavenly celestial Feng spirit. This time, the real hero of the national competition was Lin Feng. Many people were still silent on the bank of the lake. They were looking at the 9 dragons floating above the water. The person on the throne had only said 2 sentences. Then he had stopped talking as if he never existed, to begin with. When Yu Menghe attacked the old man, he didn't even attempt to stop her. Until that moment, nobody knew exactly who he was. Many people believed it to be the king of Shuiyu. A gentle breeze started to blow across the lake. The dreary and desolate moonlight was starting to fade, and it was growing cold. Everybody may leave now. Finally, the one sitting on the throne spoke. He sounded calm and serene, but his words were firm. Leave? Was everybody just supposed to leave? Was the national competition over? Had it really been stopped? The crowd all let out disappointed sighs. Many of them still wanted to see the other high officials fight, but now it seemed impossible. Most of them had traveled a long way to watch. They could at least be happy that they had seen the rise of Lin Feng. He would be the newest entry to the 8 high officials. From that day on, Lin Feng was one of the 8 high officials. The dragon roared, which caused the air to shake. The water of the lake started to grow turbulent as the 9 flood dragons dashed into the sky and spread their gigantic wings. When the crowd saw those 8 mighty dragons, they started to shake. They were wondering who the dragon's master was. Who was it on the throne? It should be the king, right? At that moment, a member of the Wuxia sect whispered, trying to guess who the person was. The king? In my opinion, he wasn't anyone powerful. Lin Feng acted so aggressively. Yu Menghe then threatened and insulted everybody, and all those people were killed in front of him. Should such a coward be called a king? Joked his interlocutor. Brother, don't talk so loud. What if he heard you? Replied the other one, surprised. How could they provoke the person sitting on that throne? His status must be immense. I'm serious, what are you scared of? Even if he hears you, our teacher would not fear him. Said the other in a loud voice. He was sucking up to his teacher, Gu Chunqiu. All right, shut up, shouted Gu Chunqiu. Teacher, what I am only speaking the truth. That person didn't even dare to speak up. He just hid behind the dragons and sat on his throne. If he is not a coward and a weakling, what is? Said that person even more loudly. At that moment, everybody could hear his words and many people were watching him. Gu Chunqiu frowned and then the sound of a dragon roar filled the sky. A terrifyingly brutal chi emerged and pressured everybody, which made their facial expressions change to one of fear. How terrifying! What pressure! Gu Chunqiu's face also drastically changed. That pressure was painful for him to withstand. It was brutal, aggressive, and violent. At that moment, the person sitting on the throne was still silent but was obviously furious. This doesn't look good, said Gu Chunqiu in a low voice. Besides, the other members of the Wuxia sect looked even glummer, especially the one who had just shouted out. His face turned deathly pale in the blink of an eye, absolutely void of color. That pressure had fallen onto his body and terrified him. A subtle sound spread in the air. It was as if the atmosphere was going to break under such pressure. The flood dragon's roars were growing more violent. Their roar could almost tear apart the atmosphere. Then the curtains covering the throne were turned into dust. Immediately after, the crowd saw a silhouette streak across the sky above the lake. He was looking down to the ground, so his long hair hung loosely as it flowed on the wind. He looked extremely majestic and domineering as he stood in the sky. He also looked extremely brutal and aggressive, like a monarch. His chi was as glistening as jewels but felt like death itself. Run! Shouted Gu Chunqiu, but many people couldn't escape. They were consumed by the monstrous energy. They couldn't move under such pressure. Some people even fell to their knees. They all felt ice-cold sweat dripping down their backs, especially the one who had just insulted that person. His face was colorless and his face was twitching. That brutal silhouette nosedived in a flash. Cracking sounds spread through the air and blood burst into the sky. Hatred could be seen emerging in the eyes of the people close to the victim, and in a flash those people became corpses too. That silhouette was slicing apart his enemies in the most brutal and cruel way. Besides, those who had just witnessed that attack had started to scream. They couldn't resist the power of the pressure anymore. Their blood vessels were starting to burst, and blood filled the air. The majority of the members from the Wuxia sect were now dead. Gu Chunqiu had been slightly faster than the others and managed to escape the catastrophe. Everybody was stupefied by that brutal display. The man looked terrifying. Glancing at him once was almost enough to feel pain. His expression was extremely sharp. He was wearing a yellow Chong Pao, and his energy was brutal, violent, and monstrously strong. His brutal and violent chi gave people the feeling that there was only room for him in the world. It was as if everybody else didn't have the right to exist. That person frowned and looked towards Gu Chunqiu. Those who have no respect must die. After saying that, that man released a deadly chi which moved straight towards Gu Chunqiu, whose facial expression drastically changed. How could this be happening? How was it possible? He was so terrified when seeing the power of the attack that he didn't even think about blocking. He didn't need to fight. He stood no chance at victory. The only thing he wanted was to make it out alive. Pure chi surrounded his body, and he quickly ran away. Rose-colored clouds started to form around his body. The brutal figure rushed forwards and threw himself at Gu Chunqiu. All of his movements seemed random, but he was very organized. The brutal energy was filling the atmosphere around them. Die! A terrifying voice resonated in Gu Chunqiu's brain. He abruptly started to tremble. He wanted to dodge, but how? It seemed like it was impossible at that moment. It was the first time that he had felt such fear. It seemed like that person was inside his mind. Blood splashed everywhere. Gu Chunqiu, the patriarch of the Wuxia sect, had been killed in an instant. His body was destroyed, he was dead. Because of a few words, the Wuxia sect was annihilated. It sounded like a ridiculous lie, but this was the reality. As the crowd watched on, flabbergasted, the powerful and brutal-looking man flew through the air and landed on a dragon. He looked extremely aggressive. He was looking down on all the people around him. 18 years ago they brought us great pride, so when those seniors appeared, I would let them express themselves freely. But from today, Shuiyu is under my control and only mine. When he finished talking, his dragons roared and soared to the sky. However, the people's hearts were pounding when they recognized the man. The Crown Prince Duan Wu Dao. Chapter 442. Meeting again Wednesday. Chapter. The prince who was silently sitting on the throne was in the sky and looked extremely aggressive, proud and arrogant. Other than the prince, who could act in such a manner? This was precisely Duan Wu Dao. He was just like the rumors said, unruly, wild and aggressive. If somebody offended him, they would die. If they respected him, he would let them live happily. Respecting him was their only choice. His dragons roared, and a strong wind rolled through the atmosphere, and Duan Wu Dao disappeared into the horizon. But the crowd couldn't calm down. First Lin Feng had astonished them. Then Duan Wu Dao. Those two young men had made people's hearts tremble. The Wuxia sect had suffered tremendous losses. Even though the powerful sects in the country had a great deal of influence and power, if they insulted or disrespected him, they would die. If someone was strong enough, they have absolute freedom to do as they wished. The power and influence of those sects were nothing in front of Duan Wu Dao and his monstrous strength. He could destroy it all in the blink of an eye. He deserves to be the first-ranked high official. Rumors say that all the other 7 high officials working together would still be weaker than him. I wonder if it's true? Thought some people at that moment. Du Wu Dao was monstrously strong. In people's eyes, Chu Zhanpeng was strong and had terrifying natural abilities, but in comparison with Duan Wu Dao, he seemed insignificant. He's become even stronger, thought Yu Tianming while looking at Duan Wu Dao vanishing into the horizon. Yu Tianming was ranked second amongst the 8 high officials. His goal had always been to surpass Duan Wu Dao, but at that moment, he had just found out that Duan Wu Dao had become even stronger. The difference between them had grown even larger. Duan Wu Dao was becoming much stronger over time. He was monstrously strong. In the lovesick forest, there was a restricted area filled with beautiful green bamboo trees. The air was pure and fresh. Nature was in a beautiful harmony. In the middle of the bamboo trees, there were many small houses. They were equally spread across the bamboo forest. Those who lived there could hear the rustling from within the forest. Yu Menghe, Lin Feng and Mengqing were walking slowly through the bamboo forest. The others had gone back alone. Mother, have you stayed here for 18 years without leaving? Asked Lin Feng while looking at Yu Menghe. According to Duan Xian Yi, after having disappeared 18 years ago, the 4 outstanding disciples had stopped showing themselves. Lin Feng's mother had always stayed in the forest, in that restricted area. She didn't allow people to see her, and she didn't see others. She lived in isolation during the past 18 years. Indeed, I rarely go out, replied Yu Menghe while slightly nodding, which made Lin Feng sigh with sadness. That place was very beautiful, but staying there all the time was probably very lonely. At least Lin Feng wouldn't be able to do it. Lin Feng enjoyed cultivation. He wanted to become an extremely strong cultivator. He wanted to break through to the different cultivation layers in the hopes that he could soar into the heavens and never have to worry again. Little Feng, do you think that it was terribly boring for me to stay here for 18 years? Maybe even useless? Asked Yu Menghe while looking at Lin Feng in a soft and gentle way. Indeed, replied Lin Feng while slightly nodding. He did think that way. Wait until you understand the lovesick forest better, and we will see if you still think that way, said Yu Menghe with a mysterious smile on her face which surprised Lin Feng. Could it be that that forest hid something special? I first want to show you a certain place, said Yu Menghe without explaining anything. The 3 of them continued walking. The path was covered with a fresh and green grass. They were walking neither slowly nor fast through the forest. In front of Lin Feng appeared many trees. They looked extremely old, and the trunks were huge. 2 or 3 people holding hands wouldn't have been able to encircle them. Those trees were at least a few hundred years old, and an ancient qi was emerging from them. They then took a few more steps, and a gigantic tree appeared in front of Lin Feng. It seemed like it was holding up the sky. It was a terrifying diameter of 10 meters. Each of its branches was extremely solid. They wore the sturdiest branches and roots he had ever encountered. That tree was 1,000 years old and gave off an ancient feeling. Lin Feng was astonished. At the top of the tree there were some log cabins. They looked comfortable yet simple. Lin Feng looked at the log cabins. Then his eyes followed the tree to its trunk and landed on a bench made from stone. There was a silhouette calmly sitting on that bench. That person had a chisel in his hand. He was calmly carving something onto the tree. Besides, next to that man there was an image, and that man was carving it into the tree. When Lin Feng saw that person, he frowned, but immediately after, he looked relaxed and smiled. He recognized him. Lin Feng started walking softly, without making any sound. He was walking towards that person. Mengqing followed Lin Feng, but in a flash Yu Menghe caught her arm, pulled her back. She then put her finger in her mouth to tell Mengqing not to make a sound, and then she smiled. Mengqing nodded and stopped moving. She only calmly watched as Lin Feng arrived behind that person. Lin Feng was still not making any noise. He slightly bent over and looked at the chisel in the person's hand. That person was calmly carving each and every single detail onto the tree. That carving looked extremely clear and detailed. It really seemed like the sculpture was the original item. Lin Feng kept looking at that hand, and he was surprised. That person used the same strength for each movement. His movements were extremely accurate. What a skillful man. Lin Feng watched the person putting the same pressure on the chisel for each and every single movement. The depth of the carving was the same in every location. Wood shavings were floating gently on the wind. The 10,000 things of creation can be used anytime and anywhere to practice cultivation, sighed Lin Feng. That person looked like he was in a state of meditation, just like Yen Yu Pingshang when he was playing the zither. That was a path to improving one's heart and changing one's state of mind. One could break through to the next cultivation layer thanks to such practices. One could turn their power from a stream into a mighty river. When that man finished his carving, the wood shavings flew away, and he then lowered his hand. He smiled and said, "Little Feng, you're making fun of your old man because his hearing has faded with age?" said the man at that moment. The man slowly turned around and smiled softly. "Father, you have become much stronger than before. How would you go deaf?" replied Lin Feng with a magnificent smile on his face. That man was the former head of the Lin clan, Lin Hai. It seems like father and mother stayed here and waited patiently for me to become stronger while helping where they could, thought Lin Feng. After he had arrived in the imperial city with Duan Feng, it seemed like certain things were miraculously falling into place, as if someone was attempting to guide him in secret. Lin Feng was sure that much of the help he received in the past was because of his parents. Lin Hai stood up and hugged Lin Feng's shoulders. Lin Feng had grown as tall as him. Lin Hai smiled. He looked happy. I wouldn't have thought that my son would become so famous and stand out so much. It seems like I was wrong to think you were ordinary, said Lin Hai, sounding somewhat proud. His son had become his pride. Back then, he wanted Lin Feng to live as an ordinary person. He wanted him to have an absolutely normal daily routine, but after knew that Lin Feng could never be an ordinary person. Besides, even if Lin Feng had wanted to have a common and ordinary life, it would have been impossible for him to live a safe and peaceful life. If he were ordinary, people would bully him for being weak. Lin Feng had started his life as an ordinary young man and then, step by step, he became extremely strong. Lin Hai had never thought that such a thing would happen. After all, when Lin Feng was 15, it was impossible for him to be more ordinary. Lin Feng shook his head and said, Father, the Lin clan, Yangzhou City. I know everything already. You handled everything correctly. Don't think of showing warm feelings to people who treat us badly. You only reacted to their provocation. You have become merciless, little Feng. Too bad that your old father's cultivation was sealed. That's the reason I went back to Yangzhou City and became the head of the Lin clan, sighed Lin Hai. Lin Hai had an unyielding personality. He had been extremely aggressive to Lin Badao, Lin Haoran, and some other elders because they had bullied Lin Feng. Lin Hai was merciless too. He attacked Lin Haoran and killed an elder. Lin Hai was never a coward or a weakling. He had become the head of the Lin clan but had remained silent because his cultivation had been sealed, and because of the secret regarding Yu Menghe. In the imperial city, everybody knew about the 4 outstanding cultivators who had amazed the entire country 18 years ago, and they even knew that one of them was carefree, unyielding and proudly soared into the heavens. However, Lin Hai controlled himself and remained hidden inside the imperial city all this time. Chapter 443. The Strange Place, Thursday's first chapter. Likey. Classes have started. The Dreadness. Also sorry about the last PMG chapter 1 passed out XD. Alright, that's enough you two, stop talking about such sad things, let bygones be bygones, said Yu Menghe indifferently while shaking her head when she heard Lin Feng and Lin Hai. Then Yu Menghe and Meng Qing joined them. Lin Hai looked at Yu Menghe and smiled. Alright, let's not talk about the Lin clan. Those things belong to the past, so let's forget about them. But little Feng, don't worry, the Lin clan still has hope. The blood of the Lin clan will continue flowing into the veins of the new generations. There you go again, said Yu Menghe while glaring at Lin Hai, which surprised him, but he then immediately smiled wryly. When Lin Feng and Meng Qing saw Yu Menghe and Lin Hai laugh, they laughed too. They looked like they were still deeply in love, a simple and tender love. Father, you came to the imperial city. Why didn't you tell me anything? Asked Lin Feng, who was surprised. Little Feng, do you know how your father left the imperial city in the past? Asked Lin Hai to Lin Feng, which surprised him. He remained silent and replied, that guy from the imperial clan, indeed. 18 years ago, your mother had just given birth to you, but Duan Ren Huang sealed my spirit and my cultivation. Then he forced me to leave the imperial city. He forbade me from entering the imperial city, not even a single step. Back then I felt so humiliated. I hated him, but because of you, I chose to ignore the humiliation and return to Yangzhou City. I intended to stay there forever. I had decided never to return to the imperial city again, but you changed my mind. In the end, I stopped caring about such things and broke my promise to never return. So I returned and found your mother, said Lin Hai slowly. Apart from you and those who live here, nobody else knows that I am in the lovesick forest. If Duan Ren Huang knew that I had returned to the imperial city, he would come to kill me. What I am trying to say is, if your life wasn't in grave danger, your mother would have never revealed herself and brought you here to see me. When Lin Feng heard Lin Hai, he remained silent. So that's how it was. His father had gone to the imperial city to find his mother, and it was extremely dangerous. His father returning to the imperial city was an absolute secret, and he couldn't show himself to anyone. Duan Ren Huang is one of the 4 geniuses from 18 years ago? asked Lin Feng. A cold light was in his eyes. Duan Ren Huang, what a powerful name. Surprisingly, his name contained the characters, Huang. Indeed, that's him, Duan Ren Huang. He was a very ambitious person. Now, he's probably the one who is really controlling Xueyu, said Lin Hai coldly. Duan Ren Huang had injured them and forced Lin Hai to leave and never return. Their agreement was that Yu Meng he wasn't allowed to leave the Imperial City, and Lin Hai wasn't allowed in the Imperial City. Otherwise, the Duan clan would have continued to hunt them down. The one who really controls Xueyu, whispered Lin Feng. It was him. He hunted down his parent 18 years ago and disappeared afterwards. Because of him, Lin Hai was forced to enter the Imperial City in secret, not daring to show himself. Little Feng, don't think about those things too much. Maybe Duan Ren Huang is not even in Xueyu anymore. With his talent and cultivation level, he could have decided to move to a better place with stronger cultivators. He probably didn't want to stay in a tiny country like Xueyu. His goal was probably Xueyu or even the vast and endless continent of the 9 clouds. Added Yu Meng he, to which Lin Feng slightly nodded. Indeed, if 18 years ago things had happened differently, Lin Feng's father, Lin Hai, would have probably left Xueyu. He would have followed his martial path and grown even stronger. Lin Feng, even though Duan Ren Huang hadn't shown himself for a long time, there is another person whom you should also be careful of, added Yu Meng he. Whom? The Crown Prince Duan Wu Dao, replied Yu Meng he in a grave tone. She then continued, Duan Wu Dao has the same blood as Duan Ren Huang. They have identical temperaments too. Duan Ren Huang and Duan Wu Dao are very close. Besides, Duan Wu Dao is now ranked first amongst the 8 high officials. Just like Duan Ren Huang was in the past, they have terrifying strength and shocking talent. Duan Wu Dao, whispered Lin Feng. The Crown Prince Duan Wu Dao was wild and unruly, aggressive and violent. If anyone offended him, he would kill everyone involved. But if people were nice to him, he would treat them well. He was extremely aggressive when provoked. I will be careful, nodded Lin Feng. Yu Meng he smiled and nodded while looking at Lin Feng. She then added, sounding confident, Little Feng, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You're only 18 years old and you can already kill cultivators of the 4th Xianqi layer. You're much stronger than your father and me at your age. Apart from Duan Wu Dao, none of the other high officials have more potential than you. You will be stronger than all of them soon enough. It's only a matter of time. Your objective should be to reach the top of the 8 high officials. The top of the 8 high officials. Lin Feng raised his head and gazed solemnly into the distance. His objective needed to be more than that. Maybe his natural abilities weren't high enough. Maybe he wasn't very strong, it didn't matter. He always needed to aim for higher goals. If he didn't have the talent, he would pay in blood, sweat and tears to make his dreams come true. He had to keep climbing higher, until everyone that looked down on him was forced to look up at him and watch him soar into the heavens. It was the same as with Chu Zhanpeng. Nobody thought that Lin Feng could compete with him. In front of Chu Zhanpeng, he was nothing more than an insect. However, Lin Feng had never considered Chu Zhanpeng as his goal. He just focused on becoming stronger to protect the ones he cares for. He broke through every hurdle which stood in the way of his martial path. Duan Wu Dao, the Crown Prince, cannot have Xueyu as his goal, thought Lin Feng. If Duan Wu Dao had had Xueyu as his goal, he would have become dispirited and would have lost the motivation to grow stronger. Duan Wu Dao was able to push everybody aside because he always pursued the goal of becoming stronger. Little Feng, I will bring you to a certain place. Yu Meng he suddenly said mysteriously, which surprised Lin Feng. A certain place? Could it be that there was something incredible in the lovesick forest again? Lin Feng looked at his father Lin Hai. He was smiling, which made Lin Feng even more surprised. All right, replied Lin Feng while nodding. He was truly curious. Yu Meng he led the way and they started walking through a dense forest. Lin Feng and Meng Qing calmly followed from behind. They crossed a distance of about 1,000 steps and in front of them appeared a few trees which were around 1,000 years old as well. There were 4 ancient trees. This place was extremely dark. The trees were blotting out the sky and not a single light could enter their domain. Vines had already wrapped around the trees. In the middle of those 4 trees there was surprisingly a cave going into the ground. One couldn't see into the cave though. It was very strange. It looked extremely deep. Yu Meng he took a step forwards and walked into the cave. Lin Feng was stupefied. Little Feng. Come, said Yu Menghe while turning her head and smiling at Lin Feng. After that, Lin Hai entered the cave too. Lin Feng looked at them and then suddenly, Yu Menghe and Lin Hai disappeared from sight. They disappeared inside the cave in an instant without any warning. What is this? Lin Feng was dumbstruck. How strange, two people had just disappeared as if they were never there to begin with. It must be an illusion, suddenly whispered Lin Feng. It had to be a form of witchcraft. Only witchcraft could lead to such a perfect illusion and alter the physical rules of the world. The path of witchcraft was in perfect harmony with nature. It could borrow the strength of the earth and the sky to reshape the land. One could use it to confuse or to create illusions or even to kill people. Mengqing, let's get in too, said Lin Feng while pulling Mengqing's hand. They then slowly entered that cave. Inside that cave, everything was different. Mengqing and Lin Feng just had the feeling that they were fainting. Everything was spinning around them and suddenly, another place appeared around them. It was a bright and cloudy sky. There was a desert and the sunlight was trying to pierce through the clouds to illuminate the earth below. How is that possible? Where are we? Lin Feng's heart started pounding violently. He was astonished. Mengqing was astonished too. When they saw how vast that desert was, they had the feeling that they were still in an illusion, but on the other hand it felt too real. How could it be an illusion? Where are we? Lin Feng tried to keep clear-headed and asked that question to Yu Menghe and Lin Hai. Everything was too astonishing. It was so incredible that Lin Feng and Mengqing couldn't believe it. Little Feng, the first time your mother brought me here, I was even more astonished than you, said Lin Hai while laughing. He then continued slowly. You're right, it's not an illusion, we're just in another location. This is a strange place we found connected to the lovesick forest. Chapter 444. Lin Feng's Power and Influence. Thursday's last chapter of the day. What a strange place. Lin Feng shivered. This place belonged to the real world, it wasn't an illusion. After remaining silent for a while, Lin Feng sighed. This world was full of mysteries. Things Lin Feng could never imagine continued to happen. Having come to the continent of the 9 clouds after his death was already astounding. Besides, in the continent of the 9 clouds, Lin Feng didn't know how many extremely strong cultivators there were. Lin Feng had no doubts that there were cultivators who could destroy mountains and empty oceans, but what he was wondering about was, would he be strong enough to meet them? Are there people here like us? Suddenly asked Lin Feng. Lin Hai nodded and said, yes, and many of them also practice cultivation just like us. This place is still in the continent of the 9 clouds, but it is a long, long way from Shuiyu. The cave enabled us to come here. You mean like teleportation? Asked Lin Feng stupefied. In his previous life, Lin Feng had heard about teleportation in books, and had seen teleportation in movies. You know about teleportation? A flash of shock passed through Lin Hai's eyes. He was surprised. They were far from being at the level of teleporting themselves. There were some rumors about it though. Lin Hai had read about teleportation in an ancient book, but surprisingly Lin Feng knew about it too. Teleportation really exists, thought Lin Feng, surprised. Considering Lin Hai's words, there were really some people who used teleportation in the continent of the 9 clouds. But in ancient books, people teleport themselves from one place to another, feel dizzy and nauseous. However, I have passed through the illusion and into the cave many times, but I have never had such a feeling. It feels very smooth each time without any strange sensations. It seems like the kind of teleportation they mention in books is not entirely the same as ours. Maybe our teleportation is not really a teleportation spell at all, I'm not sure either way, said Lin Hai. Lin Feng was speechless. If that wasn't a teleportation spell and the cave illusion enabled them to move from one place to another, then what exactly was it? Lin Feng suddenly turned his head around and gazed into the distance. The desert was vast and boundless. There was absolutely nothing. Lin Feng was surprised. Father, how are we going to get back? Very easy. You just need to go stand where you arrived in the first place, close your eyes and think about going back. That is why I am saying that it doesn't seem like a teleportation spell. In the ancient books, they talk about 2 types of teleportation, a return teleportation, a one-way teleportation. For the return teleportation, the 2 places have a gate so people can cross back and forth. In the case of one-way teleportation, There is no possibility of returning, but here we used an illusion to travel here. Then we just have to think of the location to return. How strange. Lin Feng didn't understand how it worked at all. He then asked again, Father, have you ever walked around here? Have you ever asked people what the name of the place is? Are we still in the Shuiyu region? Even though those people practice cultivation too and speak the same language as us, their personality and mentality is very different. They are very stubborn, so to say. There is a city. Its name is Tianyahage. Its army is extremely strong and they control everything in this region. The region is like a fortress. Its inhabitants are only allowed to live inside that city. For example, they cannot go out and wander the desert freely. As far as other places are concerned, they call the outside world the ruins. They cannot take even half a step outside of their city. The ruins? They think the outside world is just made of ruins? Asked Lin Feng. I don't know. Maybe they haven't been out of their city before. Said Lin Hai while shaking his head. People there have absolute faith in their government and city. At such a level, it cannot even be called nationalism anymore. They have absolute faith in their beliefs. They believe from the bottom of their heart that the outside world is composed of only ruins. Nobody dares to question that statement. Nobody dares oppose the government of Tianyahage. Their religion is omnipresent in their thoughts. Besides, they have never heard of Shuiyu. They only know that they are in the continent of the 9 clouds. What kind of horrible place is that? Lin Feng was speechless. Nationalism, religion? Nobody dared call their beliefs into question? Nobody dared oppose the government? They didn't allow anyone to go to other places and have a look. Little Feng, don't judge people and their beliefs. I discovered that place more than 10 years ago, but I still haven't really understood its culture. I just know that we are in a distant corner of the continent of the 9 clouds. After finding that out, I stopped caring. I just came here to cultivate. Yu Menghe smiled and said to Lin Feng, Little Feng, look. Yu Menghe was pointing at something in the distance. There was a large group of people running towards them. Little Feng, look over there too, said Yu Menghe while pointing to another place. Lin Feng turned his head and saw more silhouettes appear in the distance. 18 years, I didn't waste any of that time. All of the women I took in were poor and living miserable lives. I brought them to Lovesick Forest and taught them cultivation. Now, not only do they know cultivation, but they were all taught witchcraft too. They have all spent over 10 years training, and thanks to their efforts, they are all strong enough to help shoulder our responsibilities. Some of them even have strength surpassing the Xianqi layer. Coupled with their witchcraft, they are all extremely strong. At that moment, the woman who was referred to as the most beautiful woman of Shui, you didn't look soft and gentle at all. Sharp and cold lights filled her eyes. 18 years ago, because she didn't have the enough strength and because her support abandoned her, she was torn away from her husband. She hadn't even been able to see her husband and son for too long. Yu Menghe didn't want such a tragic situation to ever occur again. Therefore she sheltered those girls and transformed them into powerful women. She taught them cultivation, and the girls had become a source of power and influence for her. She had built that for herself, and for her son Lin Feng. Now, her son was together with her. She would feel less anxious if Lin Feng was protected by her secret troop of women. That way, Lin Feng would have a source of power and influence to support him at all times. He wouldn't only have his mother's power. Lin Feng would no longer get bullied and humiliated because he had no power or influence. Like when the Wanshou sect continuously threatened and tried to kill him. If Lin Feng had this troop of women at his command, Lin Feng wouldn't have needed to fight at all. Those women would have slaughtered the Wanshou sect to the very last disciple. Lin Feng nodded. He had already witnessed how strong these women were. The first time was in the Lovesick Forest, when they crippled Yu Qiu's cultivation. The other time was when 6 women, all of them only in the Xianqi layer, used the colorful ribbons to completely bind the old man's body. They had severely injured him and restrained his every movement, allowing Lin Feng kill him with ease. Their strength was terrifying. Some were even much stronger than Lin Feng. Little Feng, all of them are now yours. Let them be your source of power and influence. Use them to make the entire country of Shuiyu tremble in fear. Said Yu Menghe, which astonished Lin Feng. Mine? But, do you think that with my strength I still need power and influence to support myself? Said Yu Menghe, interrupting Lin Feng. From the beginning, when I taught them cultivation, it was exclusively for you. If someday you don't need them, just free them from your service and let them live their own lives." When Lin Feng heard Yu Menghe, he remained silent. Indeed, Yu Menghe with her strength didn't need them. She had raised them especially for Lin Feng. Lin Feng would be able to have more power and influence with them acting as his support. "All right, I can start with my plan then," whispered Lin Feng. He then immediately nodded and said, "Mother, thank you for giving them to me." Chapter 445. Break the Spell. Haku, Lord of the Edit. Tuesday's chapter. It had been over 2 years since the Wanshou sect, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, Ice and Snow Mountain Village, and the Haoyu sect acted together to destroy the Yunhai sect. The elders of the Yunhai sect and Patriarch Nangongling sacrificed their lives to save Lin Feng. They all fought with their lives on the line to protect him. It was a tragic yet moving event. The blood of the Yunhai sect formed a river which ran through the stormy gorge. Once Lin Feng and Meng Qing had gained enough strength, they would return to see that river of blood. Since the Yunhai sect was destroyed, Lin Feng always carried the ring of the Patriarch. He wanted to bring the Yunhai sect back to life. He wanted to avenge all past grievances. All the members of the Yunhai sect were sacrificed to save Lin Feng. Even after gaining tremendous strength, Lin Feng could never forget the promise he made. Since the bloodbath on that day, Lin Feng had never forgotten the Yunhai sect. He remembered each moment clearly. Lin Feng would have his revenge. It was only a matter of time, nothing more. Lin Feng had already broken through to the second Xianqi layer, but relying on his abilities, he could easily kill cultivators of the third Xianqi layer, and killing people of the fourth Xianqi layer was only slightly more difficult. Besides, he had a strong, battle-hardened army behind him, and at that moment he also received the powerful women raised by Yu Menghe. With all of these people under his control, it was a good opportunity to deal with matter regarding the Yunhai sect. Concerning those who had destroyed the Yunhai sect, none of them would be able to escape judgment. Lin Feng raised his head and looked to the sky. The sky reminded him of the deep look that always appeared in Protector Kong's eyes, which was always in contrast to Protector Bei's soft and gentle smile. He could remember how Nangongling didn't waste any words. Lin Feng was moved and touched by the lives that were sacrificed to protect him. He would never forget their faces as they opened a path for him. Back then, Lin Feng had only broken through to the Lingqi layer. He was still an immature young man. But Protector Kong and Protector Bei still sacrificed their lives for him. Protector Kong, relying on his shadow spirit, could have easily escaped, but he hadn't. He had stayed and fought with all his power, allowing Lin Feng to escape safely. Besides, Protector Bei accompanied Lin Feng to the temple, but he turned back and chose to die while fighting with the others. Lin Feng felt like he was reliving all of the moments that lead him to this day. Duan Tianlang. There was a name which would remain in Lin Feng's mind. Lin Feng could see Duan Tianlang's mocking face as he closed his eyes, causing his expression to suddenly become colder. Duan Tianlang had lived far too long. Lin Feng needed to kill him. Besides, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu also needed to be erased from existence. When Yu Menghe heard that Lin Feng accepted the women, she smiled. In Shuiyu, many people wanted Lin Feng dead. Lin Feng now had even more power to protect himself. Even if he only had a few of them to protect him, he would be in no danger. Little Feng, their troop has 36 in total. Each of the 36 are extremely strong and have practiced witchcraft. You can deploy them in a 6x6 formation, which will allow them to cast 6 spells. You can also deploy them in a 4x9 formation and they can cast 4 strong spells or 9 weaker spells. In these formations, they will combine their power to unleash a spell. If you use 9, their power will combine into a single spell which will allow them to unleash their strongest spells. It allows them to fight with maximum strength. Yu Menghe explained to Lin Feng. Of course, Lin Feng was going to have them under his control, so he needed to know what abilities they had. When Lin Feng heard Yu Menghe, he was a bit surprised. They could all use witchcraft and there were 36 women in total. They had the power to slaughter an endless number of strong enemies, especially as they grew stronger. I created this as a special unit designed to use witchcraft. They are all able to act and fight together in perfect synchronization. The second reason that I chose them was to free them from their tragic fates. After I took them in, they were reborn, they were given a second life in which they are all sisters. This bond that they form together also increases their ability to use witchcraft. Yu Menghe smiled and said, Lin Feng, do you want to give it a try? All right, nodded Lin Feng. Immediately after, he started walking towards a group of women. There were 6 beautiful women wearing white clothes. They were sitting on the ground in a circle. Their eyes were closed, but a strange light was emerging from their bodies. The atmosphere of the desert was absolutely silent, and there was no wind to break the eerie atmosphere. Lin Feng was slowly walking towards the 6 women. He was about 10 meters away from them. Then as he took another step, an extremely strong wind started to blow. It was ice cold and Lin Feng felt like the wind was piercing through his flesh. In the middle of the calm desert, a piercingly cold wind had suddenly unleashed itself on Lin Feng. But Lin Feng didn't stop walking forwards, he continued. The air continued to grow colder as it pierced deeper into his bones. The golden sand started to spiral across the ground, and eventually started to rise into the air. It continued to spin in the air until it formed a small tornado. He was now surrounded by 6 small tornadoes. A deadly energy emerged from the tornadoes and attacked Lin Feng in the blink of an eye. Lin Feng was surprised. What a pure and unadulterated killing intent. Nothing was being held back. Boom! A violent sandstorm was suddenly unleashed. The small tornadoes started to merge together and form a terrifying storm that spun around Lin Feng. Lin Feng couldn't see anything, he was surrounded by the terrifying storm. Lin Feng was astonished. He also released some terrifying deadly energy. Without mercy for his opponents, his deadly qi immediately burst into the sky and poured into the atmosphere. Lin Feng was releasing more and more deadly energy. His murderous energy was indestructible. That terrifying deadly qi rolled across the sky. The cold sandstorm seemed like it was started to lose its power, as if it was starting to grow weaker. It seemed like Lin Feng's deadly energy now had enough power to suppress the sandstorm. At that moment, the deadly energy moved like waves, moving back and forth then crashing down. The wind was slowly fading, as if it was never there to begin with. Young Master's deadly energy is extremely strong. It is also very pure and dense. It is much stronger than the deadly energy contained within our spell. If we fought, we would definitely lose, said one of the 6 women while opening her eyes. Her voice sounded clear and melodious. Chun Feng, now is not the time to give face. You stopped using your full power. He would definitely lose if you didn't give him face, said Yu Menghe while laughing and looking at Lin Feng. When she saw that Lin Feng looked embarrassed, she laughed even more and said, Little Feng, don't think that those 6 tornadoes are not strong. It was only the beginning of their spell. If the 6 tornadoes really merge as one, the strength you released a moment ago would only provide you with a few extra moments of life. Lin Feng looked pensive. With the deadly energy that he had just released, he wouldn't have won against a genuine formation spell? Of course, if you spare no effort and use every ounce of your strength, you would have the power to overcome the spell and win against these 6, said Yu Menghe explaining to Lin Feng in detail. If he used every ounce of his power, he would be able to defeat the 6 cultivators surrounding him, but there were still 30 other members. Yu Menghe's troop wasn't considered a weak force at all. In 18 years, Yu Menghe had spared no effort in order to create such a powerful group. Mother, tell them to use their full strength, said Lin Feng while slightly grinning. His smile was filled with confidence which stupefied Yu Menghe. She immediately said, Chun Feng, the young master wants you to use your full strength. You know what you have to do. I know, replied Chun Feng while smiling at Yu Menghe. Very quickly, their tornadoes rose into the air, and the tornadoes began to encircle Lin Feng again. Little Feng is still too young. He has too much confidence, maybe he will need to be injured by the spell before he understands, thought Yu Menghe while smiling. Lin Feng will win, said Meng Qing at that moment in a low voice which stupefied Yu Menghe. She then said to Meng Qing, How come you believe in little Feng so much? I believe in him more than I believe in myself. If he says that he is going to try something, it means that he has a plan to win, explained Meng Qing, to which Yu Menghe shook her head and said, while smiling, Meng Qing, you have too much confidence in him. Of course, Yu Menghe was actually extremely happy to see Meng Qing's faith in Lin Feng. Yu Menghe was still smiling, and when she suddenly heard a large impact, the sandstorm had stopped blowing and the 6 women were blown away. Yu Menghe was astonished. Immediately after, she saw Lin Feng appear in front of her again. He looked calm and serene as if nothing had happened. "It seems like you know my son much better than me," said Yu Menghe to Meng Qing. Lin Feng had won, and he won very quickly. In the blink of an eye, he had broken the spell. Yu Menghe turned to Lin Feng and asked, "You understand the intricacies of spells?" "Yes, I do," replied Lin Feng while nodding. In Yangzhou City, he had spent a long time researching spells and formations. That sandstorm spell formed from 6 tornadoes wasn't that complex, it was very simple for someone with the know-how to break. Chapter 446. Yending Mountain Likey. Whoops, this was lurking here? Sorry it came out late today. My birthday lost Wednesdays. Chapter Yendang was the name of a mountain chain to the northwest of Yangzhou City. Many influential groups resided within this mountain chain. At the top of the highest mountain in the Yandan mountain chain, there was a vast and boundless palace. The owner of that palace was respected and revered by everyone within the surrounding 100 kilometers. That palace was a restricted area though. Ordinary people couldn't enter it, and even many nobles didn't dare try to enter. That was due to the fact that the owner of the palace was an old man with an extremely bad temper. The old man's specialty was swords. When he was angry, he would go out and destroy a small mountain. He had the power to turn mountains into ashes, not to mention human beings. Besides, that old man had 2 disciples, a young girl and a young man. They were both extraordinarily talented. They could even go head-to-head with the smaller influential groups within the country by themselves. They were very strong. At that moment in the palace, there was a terrifying deadly energy floating in the atmosphere. It then dashed into the sky, making the air shake so violently that the ferocious beasts in the region started to run in the opposite direction. The deadly energy was so strong and powerful that it could cause one's soul to shake. Boom! The deadly energy exploded again as a silhouette appeared in the sky, and then landed on the top of the palace. He was releasing even more monstrous deadly energy. At that moment, the old man didn't look like an old man at all, he looked like a beast. Behind the old man there was a beautiful girl. Her eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. Lin Feng had killed her fellow disciple. She hated him. They had to avenge her fellow disciple's death. She hadn't gone to look for Lin Feng because she knew that she didn't have the power to go against him. Instead, she ran day and night until she returned to Yendang Mountain, so she could tell her master of Ling Tian's death. If her master got involved, it would without a doubt be the end of Lin Feng. "You stay here, I Ji Guang will go collect his head and bring it back here for all to see. I will avenge my beloved disciple," said the old man coldly. The girl looked at him in a calm and solemn way while nodding, and then she replied, "Yes, master." The old man released a pure qi which broke the stones under his feet. He jumped into the air and started to run across the sky. However, shortly after he moved into the sky, a sword beam appeared in the valley and rushed towards him. This stupefied the old man. He didn't hurry to leave and waited for the person to arrive before him. It was a man who looked around 30 years old. He looked smart and handsome. His eyebrows were sharp like swords. His eyes were the eyes of a madman who would destroy everything with his sword. His aura was swift and sharp, like an accomplished sword cultivator. "Ji Guang," said the man in a cold tone which surprised Ji Guang, who was still fixedly staring at him. "Who are you?" asked Ji Guang. The man was filled with killing intent, but at the same time he looked like an extremely powerful opponent. "I've heard that you, Ji Guang, are an expert at using swords. When you hold a sword in your hands, you become a messenger of death. Everybody that encounters your sword is sent to their grave. I think that we could learn from each other. Let us compare notes," said the man in a cold tone. A terrifying battle energy emerged from him. That person was challenging Ji Guang's sword. The girl who was behind Ji Guang frowned. That man was only about 30 years old and he was challenging her master to a sword duel. How arrogant! A terrifying sword energy emerged from the man's body. That sword energy was monstrously sharp, and the most terrifying thing about it was the lack of emotion. It was as if all his emotions were void. as if his sword was the only thing in the world and everything else was merely straw dogs. Zhuge Wuqing. Ji Guang was astonished. Even though he had never seen Zhuge Wuqing, in Shuiyu apart from him, nobody else had such a powerful and emotionless sword. Two powerhouses were fighting with swords. They were both extremely famous sword cultivators. One was Ji Guang, the other one was Zhuge Wuqing. Ji Guang also released a terrifying sword energy which covered the skies. It seemed like there were millions of extremely bright lights which twinkled in the sky. It was dazzling. The entire Yendang mountain chain was illuminated by his sword energy. Who is fighting? What a terrifying sword energy! The people from the mountain chain started to notice the scene above them. They all started shaking under the pressure of such powerful sword energy. That sword energy was definitely from Ji Guang's sword. Surprisingly, there was another extremely strong sword cultivator who was fighting against him. Who was strong enough to compare with Ji Guang's sword? The girl behind Ji Guang started shaking. What a terrifying sword! Zhuge Wuqing, since you have come to fight, use your full strength. The sound of a sword unsheathing filled the air and a sword appeared in the old man's hand. It looked like a ray of light. A gigantic sword spirit then emerged from behind Ji Guang. The spirit was unleashing a shocking sword energy. I, Zhuge Wuqing, haven't directly used my sword for 18 years, but today, in front of a venerable old man like you, I will unsheath my sword, said Zhuge Wuqing calmly. A simple-looking sword sheath appeared behind his back. It was shaking intensely and the sound of a sword being unsheathed spread through the air. Zhuge Wuqing had unsheathed a blood-red emotionless sword. Ji Guang, your life is over, said Zhuge Wuqing, looking as calm as before, but his voice was ice-cold and emotionless. Those two incredible sword cultivators were going to fight to death. If one of them managed to reach the other with their sword, they would definitely kill the other. There would only be one person walking away today. Ji Guang's heart was palpitating. Nobody said anything, as the two sword energies started rolling through the atmosphere and colliding against each other. An extremely bright sword qi and an emotionless sword qi illuminated the atmosphere in their own respective way. A sudden wind emerged as the sword energies rose into the skies and crashed against the other. Suddenly, the two silhouettes disappeared from sight. The pressure released by the sword energies was intense. Everyone under that pressure felt like they were going to be ripped apart. The sky was tearing and ripping sounds filled the air. In a flash, the two silhouettes reappeared. An extremely bright sword qi and an emotionless sword qi emerged with them. It seemed like everything else had disappeared from sight and only the two swords remained in the air. This was the confrontation of two amazing sword cultivators. The stronger a sword cultivator was, the more dangerous and terrifying their battles were to watch. The two fighters then returned to their original positions. Ji Guang looked at Zhuge Wuqing and said, "Was this only for the advancement your sword?" Zhuge Wuqing shook his head. He had stopped stubbornly following the path of the sword for a long time now. You lost your beloved disciple, and wanted to use your sword to avenge him. However, the one you want to harm is somebody that I will use my sword to protect, said Zhuge Wuqing calmly. Ji Guang looked like he understood the deeper motives behind Zhuge Wuqing's actions. I understand, whispered Ji Guang. Without any further movements, the sound of a sword cutting through flesh filled the air. A fountain of blood burst into the air and Ji Guang's body separated into two parts. Eh? The girl screamed. She was terrified and started shaking from head to toe. There was no longer any strength remaining in her body and her face had turned deathly pale. Gotcha! Boom! The palace at the top of the mountain started to tremble, and then suddenly a huge crevice appeared in the center, as if it had been cut in two. Sunlight could now pass through the large crevice. It was an astonishing sight. Zhuge Wuqing turned around. His body transformed into a sword and he pierced through the atmosphere as he streaked across the sky. As he disappeared from sight, a few drops of blood could be seen falling from his sword. After Zhuge Wuqing left, the girl was left alone in the middle of the empty palace. She continued to cry throughout the night. All of this had been too shocking for her. Her master had lost his life in mere moments from a single sword strike. The memory of Lin Feng killing Ling Tian with a single sword strike seemed to overlap with the current images in her mind. Lin Feng killed Ling Tian just like Zhuge Wuqing killed her master Ji Guang. At that moment, This little girl felt an endless ocean of regret. Because she had made a small remark that convinced Ling Tian to go to Yangzhou City, he was now dead. Because of her, her master Ji Guang wanted to kill Lin Feng and was killed instead. She felt endless guilt. Everything she did was a joke. It was laughably pathetic. Her incredibly powerful fellow disciple had been killed. Her master that incited fear in so many people had been killed. Lin Feng had no idea about the events that were occurring at this moment. How could he know that Zhuge Wuqing traveled to Yandang in order to kill Ji Guang if he moved against Lin Feng? Lin Feng didn't even know who Master Ji Guang was, and he also didn't know that if Zhuge Wuqing hadn't intervened, he might have found himself in a very dangerous situation in the future. In the desert, Lin Feng was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. However, his terrifyingly powerful soul was floating through the air. The sand was rolling across the ground as the wind blew. Lin Feng started to focus and used his pure qi to control the movement of the yellow sand. There was currently a scroll laying in front of the cross-legged Lin Feng, one that he unfolded. On the scroll, one could see various text and pictures. It was a formation. At the top of the scroll were the word, Nine Palace Dragon Formation. Lin Feng had found this formation inside the ring of the old man that he killed during the national competition, and was using this time to learn it. Chapter 447 Tianya H. Yu Menghe, Lin Hai and Mengqing were looking at the storm of golden sand that started to form. The formation was slowly coming into being, which shocked everyone. They were all looking at each other with disbelief. Yu Menghe was stunned but pleasantly surprised. She asked, "Has little Feng learned any witchcraft or formations before?" "I don't know. But considering his vast knowledge, he has probably learnt about witchcraft and formations before. Besides, his understanding of it doesn't seem to be superficial," replied Lin Hai. Yu Menghe nodded in agreement. The Nine Palace Dragon Formation was very famous within the imperial city. If one managed to unleash the formation, it could trap other people inside. If someone who wasn't strong enough was locked inside, he wouldn't be able to break out and would remain a prisoner forever. Lin Feng, only after studying it for a brief time, was able to make the rudimentary form of the formation appear. It was an extremely rare occurrence to see someone so talented using the formation. "Master, look," said one of the girls in white. She was pointing into the distance. Those girls had been raised by Yu Menghe. They all respected her as their master. Yu Menghe raised her head and saw a storm of golden sand. It was slowly transforming into 9 palaces. Floating in the air were 9 palaces formed completely from the sand. "Not bad." Yu Menghe smiled. The 9 palaces had already taken shape. After a short time, Lin Feng would be able to cast the 9 Palace Dragon Formation. How could she not be happy for her son? However, at that moment, Lin Feng abruptly opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with a deep and mysterious expression. "Go!" Lin Feng pointed out with his finger, and the golden sand started to whistle through the air. At the same time, a dragon's roar filled the sky. The golden sand filled the air and eventually surrounded Yu Menghe and the others. Suddenly, they were all standing in a completely different location. They were all inside a golden room. They were together a moment ago, but at that moment, they were each alone inside a golden room. They were all trapped inside an identical golden room. Illusion! Yu Menghe was shaking and her face was frozen. A moment before, she thought that Lin Feng still needed some time before he was able to use the formation, but at that moment, she realized that she was wrong. Lin Feng had managed to cast the 9 Palace Dragon Formation. "Mother, how is it?" asked Lin Feng as he appeared in front of her. "Not bad," said Yu Menghe while smiling. She was impressed by her son's talent. He was extremely talented on the path of cultivation, but he also had the power to cast spells and formations. At that moment, Yu Menghe wasn't aware that Lin Feng could also concoct pills and fabricate weapons. She was unaware of how talented he was in a great deal of areas. His soul was extremely powerful compared to others, so no matter what he did, his talent would be extraordinary. Even his understanding of the qi was much more advanced than others with the same amount of power. His soul was extremely powerful, which allowed him to sense the many different domains, including witchcraft, alchemy, and many others. No matter what Lin Feng attempted, he would be beyond the ordinary. Lin Feng's soul was very different from an ordinary person. Because he cultivated the surplus souls technique, his soul was several times stronger than others. The fact that Lin Feng had immediately appeared beside her in the illusion didn't surprise Yu Menghe. Lin Feng was the one controlling the formation. Using the power of his soul, he would be able to freely travel throughout his illusion. If he wanted to change anything inside the illusion, it would only take a thought. He had absolute control. So if he wanted to enter the illusion, it only took a single thought. This is my limit, I cannot hold it for much longer. It looks like I will still need some time to master it. I need to reach the point of making it appear in a flash and have it remain indefinitely. Only then have I mastered this formation spell. When Yu Menghe heard Lin Feng, she nodded while looking gratified. In such a short time, Lin Feng was already able to achieve so much. Lin Feng didn't look proud or arrogant at all. He was only focused on mastering the formation. Even though Lin Feng could look or sound arrogant when dealing with his enemies, he wasn't really an arrogant person. On the path of cultivation, there was no room for arrogance. He would only act arrogantly in front of other people, as a means to prevent them from seeing him as weak. Mother, I need your help with this. I want to see how easy it is to break my illusion. Can you use your power to break it? Asked Lin Feng. He wanted to see how much power his illusion could withstand. All right. Yu Menghe nodded as she released a shockingly powerful qi. Lin Feng quickly moved away from her. Yu Menghe's silhouette flickered and she flew into the air with her fist raised above her head. Her fist immediately collided with the roof of the golden room. Gotcha! The golden room seemed to shake and sounded like they were about to crack apart. Yu Menghe was stupefied, but immediately after she smiled. After her punch, cracking sounds unceasingly spread through the air, as the golden room started to shatter into oblivion. After, a rumbling sound spread through the air and the illusion disappeared completely from sight. Lin Feng and the others were back to the golden desert where they were previously. The different parts of the 9-palace dragon formation were dependent on each other. If you go there, be extremely careful. It would be better for you to stay away from the central district, warned Lin Hai. He didn't feel at ease. They were in a foreign land. Dangers could be everywhere. Don't worry, father, I will be careful, replied Lin Feng while smiling. There were some terrifyingly strong cultivators in the central district of Tianyahage. Could there be cultivators of the Tianqi layer or higher? Concerning Lin Feng, he would leave Shuiyu sooner or later. It was only a matter of time. He would go and explore the continent of the 9 clouds to meet more powerful cultivators. At that moment he was in front of Tianyahage. It was a great opportunity to meet incredibly strong cultivators and see what attracted them here. Meng Qing. Lin Feng looked to Meng Qing. Of course she would agree to go with him. She walked towards him without a word and they both shot into the distance, leaving only a cloud of golden sand behind. Lin Hai looked at Lin Feng's back and smiled. Meng He, Lin Feng has become a true man. Chapter 448. The Wolves of the Desert. Edit. Likey, I just got home? Thursday. Chapter. Lin Feng and Meng Qing were running across the desert and were surrounded by a cloud of sand. The desert was extremely vast. Lin Feng and Meng Qing had already been running for a few hours, but they still hadn't made it through the desert. What annoyed Lin Feng the most was that because of the constant sandstorms, they could only run aimlessly across the sand, and they didn't know if they were heading the right way. Meng Qing, sorry for not asking for more details before I decided to leave, said Lin Feng when he saw that Meng Qing was covered in sand and tired from having to run. He felt guilty. He had thought that the desert would be much smaller and they could immediately cross it, but after a few hours, apart from a few silhouettes in the distance, they hadn't encountered anything at all. Don't blame yourself, said Meng Qing while shaking her head. She gazed into the distance and pointed while saying, look, there are some people over there. Let's go over and ask them. Lin Feng looked in the direction that Meng Qing was pointing and saw a few silhouettes moving through the desert. He then said, let's go and see. The two of them started running and very quickly they arrived in front of those people. The group consisted of 4 boys and a girl. They seemed to be wearing peculiar clothes. Their hair was also messy and unkempt. Their tan skin paired with their messy hair made them seem wild. However, the girl was very different. She seemed to be quite pretty. When the 5 people saw Lin Feng arrive, they all glanced at him. Lin Feng only looked back at them. They were in foreign territory, so it was better to see how the low 0 calories would behave. "Hello, may I help you?" asked the girl, taking the initiative to speak first, which relieved Lin Feng. Even though she had said only a few words, Lin Feng could see that those people weren't much different from them. "We have gotten lost in the desert. Could you help us find our way?" asked Lin Feng politely. When those people heard Lin Feng, they were stupefied. They got lost in the desert? They were probably young nobles who never left home. Otherwise, how would they get lost? Besides, the 2 of them looked very clean and elegant compared to the group. Lin Feng was handsome and looked very wise for his age. Meng Qing, even though she was wearing a fine veil which covered her face, they could still see that her features were very beautiful. "There is only one direction to go, continue moving west and you will eventually leave the desert, but we're heading that way so we can go together," said the girl while smiling. Her eyes were sparkling, she looked extremely enthusiastic. "All right," said Lin Feng. How could he refuse? Mixing with the local people would be a great way to learn about their culture and traditions. "My name is Nuana," said the girl while smiling at Lin Feng. She was happy to hear Lin Feng's quick response. "Lin Feng," replied Lin Feng. "Lin Feng," whispered Nana. She then asked, "Lin Feng, if you are lost in the desert, how did you get out here?" "I had nothing to do at home, so I wanted to explore," replied Lin Feng in a soft voice while smiling. "You are from the city?" asked Nuana, which surprised Lin Feng. From the city? Could it be that these people were not from Tianya Hage? "You could say that, yes," replied Lin Feng while nodding. His response was extremely quick. Nuana didn't doubt his words. Lin Feng and Meng Qing looked so clean and elegant. If they had lost their way in the desert, it probably meant that they were from the city. "You're so brave. Surprisingly, you have come all the way into the territory of the wolves of the desert," sighed Nuana, which stupefied Lin Feng. "The wolves of the desert? Don't tell me that you don't know about the wolves of the desert?" Nuana was speechless. What kind of young master was Lin Feng? Surprisingly, he had never heard that the outer areas of the city were the territory of the wolves of the desert. Lin Feng smiled wryly. It was his first time in this land. The fact that he didn't know about them wasn't strange at all. "Lin Feng, in the city there might be people who can protect you, but outside of the city, in the territory of the wolves of the desert, you have to be very careful. They are extremely wild, aggressive, brutal and violent. If you see them, you have to avoid them. They are the strongest group outside of the city. There is no way for us to fight against them," explained Nuana to Lin Feng. Lin Feng understood the whole story a bit better. The wolves of the desert were just a powerful group of bandits. Thrum! 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 The ground was starting to shake beneath their feet as a huge cloud of sand could be seen. In the distance, a group riding horses appeared. Nuana and the others were frozen in fear. They raised their heads and looked towards the group in the distance. When they saw the huge cloud of sand, their facial expressions gradually became grave. "Shit! Speak of the devil! Lin Feng, those people are from the wolves of the desert. We have to go. We can't afford to cross their path. They might decide to attack us." While talking, Nuana started running. Immediately, the 4 others from her group followed closely behind her. Lin Feng was dumbstruck. He glanced at the horses in the distance and then followed behind Nuana. They had to hurry if they wanted to avoid the group of bandits. But what surprised Nuana was that the sound of the galloping horses was growing louder and louder, as if they were coming closer. Nuana glanced back and her face turned deathly pale. They were actually moving in their direction. Oh no! Nuana was surprised. She started to run even faster, but how could she run faster than horses? Very quickly, the horses arrived and then surrounded them. They then started to run circles around them, forming a ring of sand. In the middle of the cloud of sand, the bandits looked like they found the situation amusing, especially the one leading them, who was a young man. He looked like he was about to burst into laughter. He was fixedly staring at Meng Qing and Nuana, while looking particularly perverted. Nuana and her friends pulled a long face. What they feared the most was actually happening. Surprisingly, they had come across the wolves of the desert. "Venerable and respected young man. Hello, We are disciples of the Blackwood tribe. I am the daughter of the head of the Blackwood tribe. We have accidentally crossed your path. I hope that you will not be offended and let us go," said Nuana in a polite tone. At the same time, she declared her social status in an attempt to make the wolves of the desert less aggressive. The horses finally stopped galloping. That evil-looking young man smiled coldly and said, "The daughter of the head of the Blackwood tribe? Wow, amazing, terrific. Almost scared me. Ha ha ha." All those wolves of the desert burst into laughter. It seemed like Nuana was trying to use her social status as a deterrent. But those people didn't care at all. It seemed like Nuana and the others were terribly unlucky this time. "How should I deal with that girl of the Blackwood tribe?" said the young man while laughing like a madman. He was asking the group of bandits. "Let's take her back. Of course, we should give her to the second young master. She can be your 8th wife," joked the group while laughing in a hysterical way which made Nuana's face turn deathly pale. Those people had just called him second young master? Second young master, I didn't know that such a venerable and respectable person as you would appear in this place. Please forgive my offense. The Blackwood tribe will be extremely grateful for your kindness," said Nuana, whose face was still deathly pale. She sounded very sincere though. Lin Feng frowned and looked at the group coldly. Those wolves of the desert were exactly the way he would imagine a group of outlaws to be. They were just horse-mounted bandits, nothing more. But they were powerful, which was why Nuana and the others were scared. "Perhaps it's time for 8 wives," said the second young master while laughing again. Immediately after, he started galloping away at full speed. "I hope that Nuana has heard and understood. During midday, I will come to the Blackwood tribe and will propose a marriage alliance between us. All of you must be there. Not a single person is allowed to be absent. If one of you is missing, we will exterminate the Blackwood tribe," said the second master, whose silhouette was disappearing into the horizon. The other members of the wolves of the desert then followed him, leaving a huge cloud of yellow sand behind them. Nuana's face was turned deathly pale. A marriage alliance she would be forced into becoming the wife of the second master of the wolves of the desert. Besides, she would become the 8th wife, or maybe even the 9th or the 10th. "Nuana, let's hurry and go back. We will talk to our head," said one of the boys to Nuana. He looked anxious. "Leave." Nuana looked like she was about to cry. She then said in a feeble voice, "It seems that I'm the one to blame. Outside of the city, the wolves of the desert are everywhere." Chapter 449, The Tribe Edit. Likey next one will be when I wake back up, or when someone else takes over. Friday chapter. Nuana turned around and looked at Lin Feng. "Lin Feng, is that beautiful girl your wife?" "Wife?" Lin Feng was stupefied, but he immediately smiled warmly and replied, "Yes, she is." When Meng Qing, who was sitting next to him, heard him, she felt very embarrassed, but at the same time, a sweet and warm feeling invaded her heart. "You should both run away quickly. Go back to the city," said Nana. Lin Feng looked surprised and replied, "But you heard that guy, he said that tomorrow at midday, we all have to be there. Not a single one of us should be missing, otherwise he will destroy your tribe." "I heard him, but I cannot get you involved. The second young master of the wolves of the desert is probably interested in your wife as well. You should run away as soon as possible," said Nana. She was advising Lin Feng to leave. "What about you? What if a catastrophe occurs?" Lin Feng was surprised. He wouldn't have thought that Nuana would advise them to leave when she was in such a critical situation. "I will sacrifice myself and marry the second young master of the wolves of the desert. Then nothing bad will happen to the Blackwood tribe," said Nana. "No, you can't do that. How can you marry him?" said one of the young men, who was shaking his head frenetically. When Nuana saw his facial expression, she smiled wryly and said, "Hey Shan, I'm sorry. I will not be able to marry you in the future when you are the strongest warrior in the tribe." "Nuana, I will never let you marry one of the wolves of the desert," replied He Shan with a barbaric expression on his face. He kept shaking his head over and over again. Nuana was smiling wryly. What bad luck it was for them to encounter the second young master of the wolves of the desert. "Nuana," said Lin Feng at that moment, which made Nuana turn her head towards him. "How strong are the wolves of the desert?" asked Lin Feng. Nuana looked at Lin Feng and immediately started speaking slowly. Very strong. Actually, the wolves of the desert are a tribe. They are the strongest tribe outside of the city. They are much stronger than most of the other tribes, which is why they roam freely. Apart from them, there are many other tribes that roam the desert, and many of those tribes could destroy my tribe easily. What about their battle strength? Asked Lin Feng again. The wolves of the desert is a tribe divided into many smaller tribes. In order to become the head of one of those branches, a cultivator must have at least broken through to the Xianqi layer. They are also the persists of the tribe and are extremely strong. The wolves of the desert has many strong cultivators. The weakest of them are of the Lingqi layer. Besides, the head of the entire tribe, the king of the wolves, is extremely strong, but I don't know how powerful he is. What I can guarantee is that he has at least broken through the first Xianqi layer into the second, or maybe more. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to assume his position as king of the wolves. After Nuana explained those things to Lin Feng, he remained silent for a while. His eyes were twinkling. Second Xianqi layer. Let's go to the Blackwood tribe together, said Lin Feng at that moment, which stupefied Nuana. She didn't understand why Lin Feng wanted to come. Lin Feng, are you sure? Asked Nuana solemnly. I am sure, said Lin Feng while nodding. He smiled and added, you still have to show me the way out of the desert. When Nuana heard Lin Feng, she smiled. Since Lin Feng insisted, she wouldn't try to convince him any longer. She only nodded and said, all right, let's all go back to the Blackwood tribe then. It was exactly how Nuana said. They continued heading directly to the west. After a while, they were out of the desert, but the landscape didn't look anything like Lin Feng had imagined. The land was still a vast and boundless desert, but there were exotic trees growing from the sand to form a jungle. As far as Lin Feng could see, there was sand and exotic trees. Of course, many tribes were probably living in the jungle or roaming the open desert, just like the wolves of the desert. The Blackwood tribe was situated on a hill. There was 500-600 households built around the hill. It looked more like a fortified hill village. As expected, it's just a small tribe, thought Lin Feng when he saw the small fences and simple defenses that were erected. Their defenses didn't look good at all. They were very basic defenses. They were able to stop normal people and wild beasts, but were far from being able to stop most cultivators. When Nuana came back, all the people started to greet her. Nobody asked her what she had obtained during her trip though. Everybody was just staring towards Lin Feng and Meng Qing. They were very curious as to who these people were. Nuana, who are those two strangers? Asked one of the tribe. They are my new friends we met in the desert. Explained Na. She didn't mention what had happened in the desert with the wolves of the desert. She didn't want anyone to panic. Said a loud and vigorous voice which interrupted the conversation. The crowd slowly opened a path and shouted, the head has come, one after the other. Father. The crowd opened the way and a tall and strong man appeared in front of Nuana. Nuana, didn't you bring any items back? Asked the head of the Blackwood tribe. She just shook her head. She didn't know what to say. Nuana, has something happened? Something that prevented you from returning with a good harvest? Asked Heimu at that moment. Nuana shook her head again and said, nothing, father. What are you talking about? Suddenly said He Shan while moving forwards. He looked at Heimu and said, foster father, we encountered the wolves of the desert. The wolves of the desert? When the crowd heard his words, many people started to shake. They all looked terrified. He Shan, shut your mouth, shouted Nuana, but her father glared at her until she lowered her head in silence. He then said to He Shan, son, tell me what happened. Foster father, we ran into these two when crossing the desert. Then the wolves of the desert appeared. One of the men with them was the second young master. He clearly said that at midday tomorrow, he will come and propose a marriage alliance. They also said that all of us had to be here. If any of us were missing, they would destroy the tribe. He Shan hadn't even finished talking that the crowd around them burst into an uproar. All sorts of shocked comments were spreading throughout the crowd. Heimu looked stupefied as well. The second young master of the wolves of the desert. It was said that this perverted young man loved women more than anything else in life. If he saw a beautiful woman, she would be forced into becoming his wife. He already had 7 wives, but it was still not enough for him. He was never satisfied. Nuana, what do you intend to do? Nuana groaned coldly. She remained silent for a few seconds and replied, I want Lin Feng and his wife to leave. Then I will sacrifice myself and marry the second young master from the wolves of the desert. That way, I will be the only one to suffer. Nobody else needs to get involved and nothing will happen to the tribe. You're too naive, said Heimu, interrupting his daughter. It's impossible to bargain with such people. Besides, how do you know that you're the one he wants? While talking, Heimu glanced at Mengqing. He could see how incredibly beautiful her features were. The second young master was probably extremely interested in her. Nuana, you still haven't introduced your 2 friends to me, asked Heimu in a loud voice while looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng glanced at him. Heimu really deserved to be the head of the Blackwood tribe. The way he handled things was more well-practiced than Nuana. I met Lin Feng in the desert and we became friends. That beautiful woman is his wife, said Nuana, introducing her friends. Oh, they look like a perfect match, replied Heimu while nodding. He then immediately added, It's getting late, go find a place for our guests. Heishan, bring Lin Feng and his wife to one of the guest houses. Also don't bother them and let them rest. When Heishan heard Heimu's order, he nodded and said, All right, I will let them rest. Lin Feng glanced at Nuana and saw that her mouth was slightly open. She was astonished, but she didn't say anything. It would have been useless anyway, so she kept her mouth shut. Lin Feng, come with me, said Heishan politely. Immediately after, he brought Mengqing and Lin Feng to a large house and prepared everything for them to stay the night. Lin Feng didn't say anything and happily accepted. After Heishan left, Lin Feng frowned. He walked to the window and opened it. He could clearly sense that some people were observing them. Heishan didn't trust Lin Feng. He was afraid that Lin Feng would leave and cause the destruction of the Blackwood tribe. Therefore, he had people watching them, ready to intercept them if they left. But if Lin Feng wanted to leave, would any of this be useful? Chapter 450. The most important person. Edit, Likey Friday. Chapter Heimu was the head of the Blackwood tribe. He couldn't afford to be as naive as Nuana and tell them to leave. Besides, Heimu understood the situation much better than Nuana. The second young master of the wolves of the desert probably wasn't interested in Nuana, but rather Lin Feng's wife. If that was really the case, then since Lin Feng left, the Blackwood tribe would definitely be destroyed. That was the last thing Heimu wanted to happen. He couldn't afford to gamble with thousands of lives and let them leave. Even though Lin Feng could understand Heimu's point of view, he still felt angry. Of course, he was Lin Feng and not Heimu. Heimu and Lin Feng were neither friends or enemies, so why would he care about Heimu's point of view? Lin Feng didn't want to allow others to spy on him. Nobody would accept such a thing. If he really wanted them to stay, he could have told them clearly. He didn't need to use such despicable means. Besides, Lin Feng had come here by his own free will. I am going out, said Lin Feng to Mengqing while smiling. Mengqing slightly nodded. She had of course sensed the people surrounding them. She also didn't feel comfortable with it. Who would allow unknown people to watch them while sleeping or cultivating? Lin Feng left the room and started to walk away. He looked like he was leaving the territory of Heimu's tribe. As expected, Lin Feng hadn't even made it very far when 2 silhouettes appeared in front to block him, while they remained silent. What do you want? Asked Lin Feng, sounding indifferent, yet cold. Dear guest, please go back, said one of them. He was wearing black clothes and his voice contained a coldness. He was expressionless. I want to go out for a walk, replied Lin Feng while shaking his head. Dear guest, it would be best for you to go back. There are some ferocious beasts out there, it's not safe, said his interlocutor while still blocking his path. I don't need you to worry about my safety, said Lin Feng while smiling and continued walking. The 2 people were stupefied and immediately moved in front of him again while shouting, Since it's that way, don't blame us. Why would I blame you? Said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent. He then released a terrifying energy which froze the 2 people in place. They were shocked. Get lost, shouted Lin Feng. His shout caused fear to overcome the hearts of the 2 people blocking his path. At the same time, A fist landed on each of their chests and their bodies were sent hurtling backwards. They want to rely on you to keep me here. But you only amount to this, said Lin Feng coldly. The two people were crawling across the ground and viciously staring at Lin Feng. They immediately picked themselves up and ran away. Humph. Lin Feng groaned coldly, turned around and went back to his room. He looked at Mengqing and said, Mengqing, should we stay here tonight or go out? Let's leave. It will be calmer outside, said Mengqing while smiling. Lin Feng grabbed Mengqing's hand and started to move. These days, Mengqing stopped rejecting his advances. She held onto Lin Feng's hand and they left the tribe together. They rose into the air and streaked across the sky. In the blink of an eye they were gone. After Lin Feng and Mengqing left, a group of people with torches and lanterns rushed towards the guest house. When they saw that it was empty, they were astonished. Bastard! Where did they leave from? Heimu was furious. Father, Lin Feng is not a member of our tribe. If he left, just let it be, we shouldn't interfere with others, said Nuana, who was by his side. Shut the hell up, said Heimu. What do you know? They left, which means our Blackwood tribe will meet its end. If you want to marry the second young master of the wolves of the desert, that's your problem, but now everybody is involved, your brothers and sisters will all die. Nuana's face turned deathly pale, her lips twitched and she said, Father, it was your fault for sending people to spy on Lin Feng, otherwise he wouldn't have left. If he had wanted to avoid the situation, he wouldn't have come to our tribe in the first place. Smack! Heimu was furious and immediately slapped his daughter's face. He looked ice cold. You slut! Look at what? You're staying in the guest house now. I'll lock the door, and tomorrow when the second master arrives I will give him the key. You'll be his and I'll even congratulate him at the wedding. Heimu's voice was ice cold. He then ordered a few guards to stay and prevent her from leaving. Nuana's face was deathly pale and the tears started to flow down her cheeks. In tribes like these, men held absolute superiority over women. The Blackwood tribes was no different. For the sake of the tribe, her father would rid himself of all emotion and abandon her. He would sacrifice her for the sake of the whole tribe. Lin Feng had no idea of what was happening after he left. They had already arrived at the top of a small mountain. It was a very dark and cold night in the desert. Mengqing slightly moved and put her head on Lin Feng's shoulders. She then said, Lin Feng, don't you have the feeling that there is something strange about this place? As if there is something different. Huh. Lin Feng was stupefied. He then looked at Mengqing and said, You also feel it. Mengqing smiled and said, Lin Feng, don't forget that I practice a lower moon skill. The sun is its polar opposite. I can sense both water and fire distinctly. Lin Feng nodded. Water and fire were opposite elements, so Mengqing being able to sense the overwhelming fire chi wasn't surprising at all. I can also sense it. It's like there is a fire burning under our feet that could explode at any moment. Chapter 451. Kill me? Like he was here sat chapter at midday. The scorching sun was soaring high in the sky, and the golden sand of the desert seemed like it had turned into lava beneath people's feet. At that moment, the scorching sun was shining down on the Blackwood tribe. Even though it seemed calm and peaceful, the atmosphere was rather depressing. At the entrance of the Blackwood tribe, a great majority of the tribe members were standing in wait. The head of the tribe was standing at the very front. His daughter Nuana was also by his side. However, Nuana's hair was an absolute mess and she was bound by rope. Her face was one of sadness. However, she wasn't scared at all. She only felt desperate and hopeless. She had been tied up by her own father and he was going to sacrifice her to a monster, the second young master. How could Nuana not feel desperate and hopeless? Everybody was calmly standing there and waiting. Finally, the sounds of hooves filled the air and drew the attention of the Blackwood tribe. They all looked extremely nervous. Very quickly, a cloud of golden sand rose in front of them and a group of armored horses arrived at the entrance of the village. I am the second young master of the wolves of the desert. I've come today to propose a marriage alliance. A loud and clear voice filled the air. Immediately after, many people were applauding and cheering him. With one sentence, he had stated his purpose as marriage. It didn't differ much from a kidnapping though. The second young master only allowed the Blackwood tribe to keep face, nothing more. The different horses opened a path for the young man as he appeared before the eyes of the Blackwood tribe. That young man looked extremely arrogant. When he saw that Nuana had been tied up, he was stupefied and said in an ice-cold tone, "Who is the head of the Blackwood tribe?" Heimu took a step forward and looked at the young man while bowing. He then said in an overly polite tone, "Venerable and respectable second young master, I am the humble head of the Blackwood tribe. I heard that you were interested in my daughter Nuana. I, Heimu, am willing to give her to you. She is now yours to do with as you please." But the second young master frowned and said coldly, "Who tied her up? I am here to propose a marriage alliance. This is not a kidnapping. Besides, I want your daughter and the other girl who was with her yesterday. I want you to hand them both over to me. They will be my new wives." As expected, Heimu wasn't surprised. That second young master had come for Lin Feng's wife. Nuana was just a bonus, nothing more. "Venerable and respectable second young master, please accept my most sincere apologies. I tied Nuana up because she voluntarily released the other girl," said Heimu, sounding angry at his daughter, but in reality he was terrified of the second young master. Initially, he was supposed to marry Nuana once. He became the strongest warrior in the tribe. He felt that stopping to talk with Lin Feng was the cause of everything that was happening. If they had never met Lin Feng in the desert, none of this would have happened because the wolves of the desert wouldn't be interested in them if not for Meng Qing. Lin Feng looked at He Shan's deadly energy and laughed. He then said, "I am warning you, don't attack. I never show mercy to those who want to kill me." "Die, bastard!" shouted He Shan ferociously while throwing himself towards Lin Feng. He released a brutal energy which created a hurricane as he attacked. "Wow! How strong!" thought the members of the Blackwood tribe while looking at He Shan. They were all cheering for him. He really deserved to be called a warrior of the Blackwood tribe. He Shan was really strong. Very quickly, He Shan arrived in front of Lin Feng. His fist was moving closer and closer to Lin Feng's chest, but Lin Feng remained absolutely motionless. He wasn't reacting at all. "Kill him!" shouted someone from the tribe. Lin Feng had to die for them to survive. Nuana opened her mouth. Her face was deathly pale. Lin Feng had returned, but he was going to die. He Shan was one of the strongest warriors of the Blackwood tribe. How could Lin Feng compete with him? While Nuana was thinking this, He Shan's fist bombarded Lin Feng's chest, making all the members of the Blackwood tribe laugh out in joy. He Shan was monstrously strong. Lin Feng didn't even put up a fight. Boom! He Shan's fist crashed onto Lin Feng's chest, causing his clothes flutter in the wind. However, the smile suddenly froze in place. They could all clearly see that Lin Feng was still standing, motionless, and his expression was unchanged. He hadn't moved at all and he was clearly still conscious. Lin Feng wasn't dead, he wasn't even injured. Huh! He Shan was shocked. He punched Lin Feng again, but Lin Feng remained completely motionless, like a huge mountain. He Shan was dumbstruck. He raised his head and looked at Lin Feng, who was now laughing because he found the situation terribly amusing. How's that possible? What's going on? He Shan's fist was shaking. Everybody watching was astonished as well. Lin Feng had just been punched in the chest by He Shan multiple times, but he hadn't even moved an inch. "So that's how you were planning to kill me?" laughed Lin Feng coldly. He looked perfectly calm and unaffected by what just happened. Everybody was stunned. They hadn't thought of the possibility that Lin Feng would be a strong cultivator. "I warned you before about attacking me," said Lin Feng in a cold tone. He then slowly raised his hand, and then pointed his finger. Lin Feng's finger was pointing directly at He Shan. Suddenly Lin Feng's finger started to move, which frightened He Shan, who started to quickly retreat. However, as weak as he was, would he have a chance to retreat? Chapter 452. Absolute Despair. Like Yi-san ran? Sat chapter Nana was dumbstruck as well when she saw Lin Feng attack. She also hadn't thought that Lin Feng would be so powerful. Lin Feng looked like a weak young noble from the city. When they first met, she assumed that he had run away from a noble family and entered the desert. Meeting them and then encountering the wolves of the desert had caused this situation. Interesting, joked the second young master, interrupting everybody's train of thought. The second young master was still sitting atop his horse. He then smiled and said, I wouldn't have thought that the tribe would allow someone like you to cultivate. Even if you have cultivated a little bit, the truth is that everyone from the Blackwood tribe is useless. When Lin Feng heard him, he was surprised but immediately laughed and shook his head. That second young master was really a waste of space. He hadn't even been able to determine Lin Feng's strength from such a blatant display of power. Langya, take some people and bring me his head, said He Mu in an ice-cold tone while pulling a long face. Langya was the strongest warrior of the Blackwood tribe. He had already broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer. He was using his famous weapon as well, his wolf-tooth club. His wolf-tooth club weighed 150 kilograms. With a single attack he could tear flesh and break bone. Langya was a huge muscular man who was bareback. He grabbed his wolf-tooth club and rested it onto his shoulder. He looked imposing and domineering. His eyes were large like copper bells, and he was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. I don't need anyone else to interfere. I will kill him myself, said Langya in an ice-cold way. He only took a few huge steps in Lin Feng's direction, and immediately arrived in front of Lin Feng. Without the slightest bit of hesitation, he raised his wolf-tooth club and was aiming at Lin Feng's head. While attacking with his weapon, a whistling sound filled the air as an extreme force crashed through the air. The members of the Blackwood tribe were staring at his weapon. Lin Feng had no possible escape from that wolf-tooth club. But at that moment, everybody was astonished. The wolf-tooth club had struck down, but Lin Feng wasn't there anymore. He suddenly appeared by Langya's side. Boom! The wolf-tooth club landed on the ground and the shock made Langya's entire body tremble. The crowd then suddenly saw a strange action from Langya. He fell onto the ground and started crawling. He didn't have the power to stand up. Blood could then be seen dripping onto the golden sand, turning it a deep shade of red. Finally, the crowd realized what had happened and started shaking. Their hearts were racing. The strongest warrior of the Blackwood tribe was dead, but they didn't even see how he died. On top of that, Lin Feng had never seemed like he was scared of the wolves of the desert. The most ridiculous thing was that He Mu had never even considered that such a thing might be possible. After he heard He Shan tell him about the wolves of the desert, he had only thought about how to appease them and never considered anything else. He had tied his daughter up and delivered him to the enemy. At that moment he was realizing that in his panic, he had sided against Lin Feng, who was much stronger than the wolves of the desert. Thinking back, he should have treated Lin Feng as a respected guest. However, what really happened was ridiculous. He Mu had been so scared of a weakling, and because of that weakling, he ordered people to kill an extremely strong cultivator, Lin Feng. The second young master and the tribe were astonished. Lin Feng had the strength of the Xian Qi layer. What did you say a moment ago? Asked Lin Feng while looking at the man who had just humiliated Meng Qing and him. His voice was cold and emotionless. The man could only tremble and look blankly at Lin Feng. He kept shaking his head and saying, I didn't say a word. Nothing. Lin Feng was smiling. His smile was particularly resplendent. He then released a monstrous deadly energy which burst into the sky and enveloped the man's body. The energy was so oppressive that he was almost falling to the ground. Die, said Lin Feng. A bright and resplendent light flashed through the atmosphere and fell towards the bandit. A spot of blood then emerged between his eyebrows. After collapsing to the ground, his eyes were still wide open, but apart from a few convulsions, his body was lifeless. Thump! 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 Everyone's hearts were pounding while looking at the dead body beneath Lin Feng, who was still floating in the air. BSSH. Blood suddenly sprayed into the air. All of the people who were just rushing to attack Lin Feng together had collapsed and fell from their horses. The crowd could only see the light from sword qi, but they never saw a sword being unsheathed. Some of the men urged their horses and started galloping in the opposite direction. However, anyone who tried to run was immediately killed under the sword lights. Countless silhouettes were falling from horsebacks one after the other. They were all dead. It was terrifying. Everyone was terrified and panic-stricken. Fear continued to fill the people's hearts as they then saw Lin Feng slowly rise higher into the air. A moment before they looked down on Lin Feng. However, they were now looking up at him and admiring his strength. Lin Feng to them was as dazzling as the sun. "You want to kill me?" Lin Feng's arm streaked across the sky. He was surrounded by the midday sunlight, which made his figure seem even more majestic. A few bandits let out horrible shrieks and their bodies flew away. Lin Feng had taken their lives. "You humiliated Mengqing." Lin Feng raised his hand again and his sword light shot through across the sky. Immediately after, more blood splashed into the air. He was killing each of the wolves of the desert one by one. Lin Feng didn't stop killing. His sword light was dancing across the sky as blood filled the air. At that moment, Lin Feng was still floating in the sky. He looked like a god of death. He was absolutely merciless as he continued his massacre. The members of the Blackwood tribe were all astonished and fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Their jaws were agape. They were dumbstruck and had fallen into despair. In what seemed like an instant, he had already killed a great number of people. In no time, he had slaughtered hundreds of people from the wolves of the desert, and at that moment, only one was left. The second young master. The wolves of the desert will be coming for you. They won't just let something like this go. Take advantage of this opportunity and leave. Nuana suddenly shouted. Outside of Tianya Hage, the wolves of the desert were the largest power, and they were the undisputed strongest. They had many extremely strong cultivators. They had a dozen tribe heads who were all at the Xianqi lair. They would definitely hunt down Lin Feng and avenge their people. When Lin Feng heard Nuana, he shook his head and smiled. Leave? Why did he need to leave? Lin Feng, even though you are extremely strong, the wolves of the desert are neither weaklings nor cowards. They will definitely come for you, said Nuana. She was extremely anxious. Nuana, that's enough. Young Master Lin Feng is certainly strong enough to cope with the wolves of the desert, said He Mu at that moment. He then continued, Young Master Lin Feng, I was blind before. I failed to appreciate your kindness. I hope that we can find a way for you to forgive me. You are always welcome to stay in my tribe, and we will properly receive you as venerable guests. Lin Feng looked amused when he saw He Mu's face. He had killed that group who belonged to the wolves of the desert. He had even killed the second young master. Those bandits would inevitably seek revenge. If they sent people to the Blackwood tribe and found out that Lin Feng wasn't there, they would slaughter everyone. Therefore, He Mu was being very polite and friendly, hoping that Lin Feng would forget that they had just tried to kill him. Get out of my sight, I don't want to see you again, said Lin Feng coldly, which stupefied He Mu. He then replied politely, If you remain here, I will make sure to stay out of your sight. While talking, He Mu moved back into the crowd, as if he really intended to stay out of sight, like Lin Feng said. Lin Feng and Mengqing didn't leave the Blackwood tribe. They wanted to stay with Nuana. Concerning He Mu, he kept casting his eyes to the distance. If Lin Feng left, nobody could save the Blackwood tribe. One day passed and then another. Outside of the Blackwood tribe, the sound of galloping horses could be heard on the horizon. The galloping horses were making the ground shake, giving people a feeling of majesty and pride. But the people of the Blackwood tribe weren't excited at all, they were all terrified. The wolves of the desert had come for their revenge. The ground continued to shake. A cloud of golden sand could be seen on the horizon. Everybody in the tribe remained silent as the cloud of sand grew closer. They were all trembling with fear. The group of horses then stopped outside of the tribe. Immediately after, the one who seemed to be their leader said, Kill everybody. Slaughter every person from the Blackwood tribe. Yes. The sound of galloping horses filled the air again. But this time they were attacking the Blackwood tribe. Die. A terrifying and cruel chi dashed into the skies and crashed into the crowd of people. All the people who had been touched by that terrifying chi died. Oh! Ah! Help! Blood-curdling shrieks filled the air. The wolves of the desert had only one thing in mind: slaughter. Without saying a word, they had already killed a huge number of people. It was a bloodbath. In a different corner of the tribe, Mu could clearly sense that his people were being massacred. His silhouette flickered and he immediately moved towards Lin Feng's room. After a short time, he appeared in front of Lin Feng and said, "Young Master Lin Feng, the wolves of the desert have come to slaughter us." "So what?" said Lin Feng coldly while looking at Mu. "They have come to kill you," said Mu, whose facial expression was twitching. "If they try to kill me, I will of course deal with them. I don't need you to worry about such things. Now get lost," said Lin Feng in an ice-cold tone. He looked absolutely emotionless. "But the wolves of the desert are slaughtering the members of my tribe," said Mu. He still wasn't leaving. He was expecting Lin Feng to help. "What does that have to do with me?" said Lin Feng, whose voice was getting colder. "I was hoping that you would show yourself to the wolves of the desert and stop them." Lin Feng burst into laughter, an evil laughter. He took a step forwards and stood in front of Mu. His face turned ice-cold and he said, "The Blackwood tribe wanted to kill me on multiple occasions, and now that you are in a critical situation, you want me to protect you? Is that a joke?" "I, Lin Feng, am not a fool," said Lin Feng, and at the same time he released a terrifying deadly energy. "If you don't get out of my sight immediately, I will kill you." Chapter 454. Savage Thoughts. Like you don't know what to do? Sunday chapter. Some deadly energy pressed against Mu's body. He was so scared that his legs became weak. He regretted everything and felt hopeless. He turned around and his silhouette flickered as he ran away. It was over. The Blackwood tribe would soon be destroyed. They had tried to kill Lin Feng and now they wanted his protection. Was such a thing possible? Lin Feng wasn't a saint. He wouldn't fight to save the Blackwood tribe that wanted him dead. Even if he was going to fight in the future, he wouldn't lift a finger to help them. Mu walked through the territory of the tribe and all he could see were the scattered corpses of his tribe members. A sudden pain invaded his heart. Everything was his fault. Not far in front of Mu, there was a person riding atop a fiery red wolf. That person looked majestic and cruel. Mu's silhouette flickered and in a flash, he appeared in front of the person. Then, Mu said in a very respectful way, "Venerable and respectable King of the Wolves, Your Highness, I am the head of the Blackwood tribe. I am terribly grieved by the second young master's death, but it is neither my fault nor that of my people. I had already pledged my loyalty to the second young master. I had promised to devote my entire life to him. The one who killed the second young master isn't one of us. His name is Lin Feng. He is a young man. Look, he is in there. I beg of you, Your Highness, please forgive us." The king looked at Mu indifferently, and then looked in the direction in which Mu was pointing. The King of Wolves, expressionless, said, "Fire Wolf, let's go." The fire wolf heard the king and its eyes diffused a dazzling light. Apart from its dangerous eyes, the fire wolf's fur was entirely red. "I beg you, please forgive my tribe," said Mu while bowing in front of the king. The king moved next to Mu and smiled. "I forgive you so you can all die happily." When Mu heard the king, he was stupefied. Immediately after, the wolf howled and an incredible scorching hot chi emerged. The fire wolf started to breathe fire around its surroundings. In a flash, Mu was a burnt corpse. Mu had died, devoured by the flames. The king of the wolves had shown no mercy at all. "Let's go," said the king of the wolves while walking in the direction which Mu pointed. At the same time, a group of people were following closely behind him. Their deadly chi was thick and dense. Those people were also all releasing their murderous intent in that direction. "I don't need so many people to follow me, a few is enough. The others can continue massacring the tribe members. None of them are to be left alive," said the king of the wolves in a deep voice. Many people turned back and continued looking for members of the Blackwood tribe who may have run or gone into hiding. They were going to keep killing until no one was left. At that moment, Lin Feng was sitting on the roof of the house where he had bin staying. He was calmly looking at the silhouettes on the horizon. They were moving in his direction. Lin Feng looked absolutely carefree and unaffected by it though. Very quickly, the king of the wolves and the others arrived to where Lin Feng was sitting at. They raised their heads and looked at the calm-looking young man. They were all surprised. That young man was very brave. Didn't he know why they were here? Didn't he know that they were going to kill him? Wolf King, I will kill him for you, said someone who was standing next to the king of the wolves. He wanted to show his loyalty. All right, Luo-san, go and take his life. Use your sabers to behead him. Then bring his head back to me, said the king while nodding. Don't worry, Wolf King. My sabers have grown thirsty after not tasting blood in such a long time, said Luo-san while moving forwards. He was slowly approaching Lin Feng. He then raised his head and looked at Lin Feng, who was still sitting on the roof with a carefree appearance. Don't worry, I will not kill you slowly. My sabers will first slowly slice away at your flesh, slash by slash, until eventually your head falls down, said Luo-san in a cold and bloodthirsty manner. Lin Feng was gazing into the distance calmly and serenely, as if Luo-san hadn't opened his mouth at all. Luo-san initially wanted to scare Lin Feng, but it didn't work. A bloodthirsty look appeared in his eyes. He looked ferocious and wild. He didn't even look like a human being anymore. He looked like a bloodthirsty wolf. Lin Feng glanced at Luo-san, and when he saw that bestial-looking face, he was stupefied. He looked like a hideous wolf. Remember, the one who will take your life is one of the heads of the wolves of the desert. My name is Yao Lang Luo Sr. When he finished talking, Luo-san threw himself at Lin Feng. In his bestial-looking eyes appeared a fiery red light. He really looked like a wolf at that moment. His right hand suddenly became longer, and what looked like 5 sharp blades appeared. They looked piercingly cold and extremely sharp. Besides, an ice-cold evil chi was emerging from them. Those were the sabers he had been talking about. Each and every single member of the wolves of the desert was smiling evilly, as if they could already see Lin Feng's body in front of them. At the same time, Lin Feng released a terrifying deadly chi which rolled through the air and enveloped Luo-san's body. That monstrous deadly chi made Luo-san suddenly feel extremely cold, and he started to shiver from head to toe. He suddenly looked surprised and was scared. Die, said Lin Feng while releasing a pure deadly energy that was as sharp as a sword, which pierced straight towards Luo. Senator Luo-san was astonished. His sharp claws immediately landed on the deadly energy, emitting a sharp metallic sound. However, at that moment Lin Feng was already standing and had started moving. He released more deadly energy and it slowly formed a black sword in his hand. His sword was unleashed and a monstrous amount of deadly energy emerged from it and crashed into Luo-san. His saber claws were shattered instantly. Oh! Luo-san howled like a wolf. The black sword then immediately penetrated into his body and sliced him apart. Luo-san was dead. Lin Feng took another step through the air and moved towards the other members of the wolves of the desert. He was still releasing a monstrous amount of deadly energy. Initially, Luo-san's corpse was behind Lin Feng. However, without anyone noticing, the corpse disappeared. It had disappeared completely, as if it had never been there. It was very strange. The other members of the wolves of the desert were stupefied. Lin Feng's strength was unbelievable. That scary deadly energy was surrounding them and they were all terrified. Let's kill him together, said the king of the wolves. The people who were facing Lin Feng with him at that moment were all heads of the subdivisions of their tribe. Anyone who tried to take on their combined force would die. They were such a large and powerful group that they had to be divided into subgroups. They were living in packs like wolves. Everybody was scared of them. If anyone dared to threaten them, they would join hands and kill that person together. Their eyes were all ferocious and bestial, just like a wolf pack. Boom! Lin Feng took another step and released more deadly energy which soared into the skies. Some deadly energy surrounded the group and started to suppress them. The wolves of the desert were now realizing how terrifyingly strong this young man was. Lin Feng took another step and it seemed like the ground was going to collapse. His deadly energy grew even more powerful and applied a greater pressure. Destroy him! Shouted the king furiously. They couldn't wait any longer. They had to attack and kill Lin Feng immediately. After hearing the king, all those heads threw themselves at Lin Feng. Bestial lights were twinkling in their eyes. Lin Feng didn't have the impression that he was fighting other people. He had the impression that they were all ferocious beasts. Die! Lin Feng's voice filled the air as a sword descended from the sky and immediately sliced through multiple people. Those people howled with pain as they fell down onto the ground and died. This time when their silhouettes disappeared, the king's body started to shake. He grabbed their bodies with his hands and in a flash, their corpses turned into fiery red smoke which penetrated into his body. Huh. Lin Feng was surprised. He didn't understand what was happening. What technique was that? But immediately after, his deadly energy became even more powerful, and he continued attacking with his sword. He continued to kill his way through the group. One person fell after another. The king was shaking. He took a deep breath and continued to absorb the fiery red smoke from those people. It looked particularly frightening. But the faces of those who hadn't died didn't change at all. They looked like this was absolutely normal. In their eyes there was only savage thoughts. They wanted to tear apart Lin Feng. However, they were much weaker than Lin Feng, and it was obvious trying to kill Lin Feng was the same thing as willingly courting death. Each time Lin Feng moved his sword, someone died. With every movement he would take another life. Lin Feng realized at that moment that each time he killed someone, they were being absorbed by the king of the wolves, and each time he absorbed that smoke, his qi was becoming more rampant, and he was thus becoming stronger and stronger. Chapter 455. The Four-Tailed Wolf. Likey. This is Monday's chapter. Sorry for delay, I had class so I couldn't do it until today. At that moment, Lin Feng stood with his deadly sword in his hand. Its deadly energy had enveloped the Wolf King's body. The king was glaring at Lin Feng and releasing a coarse and wild qi. The king hadn't thought that Lin Feng would be so powerful, but he didn't look scared at all. His eyes were only filled with endless ferocity. His eyes actually looked like those of a wolf. Human yet not a human. Beast yet not a beast, said Lin Feng. His opponent gave him the feeling that he was neither a beast nor a human. He just looked extremely cruel and ferocious. Surprisingly, he was able to absorb power from his dead comrades and turn it into his own power. Ewa! The Wolf King howled loudly while repeatedly shaking his head. His actions seemed just like a wolf. He looked particularly bestial. He didn't even pay attention to what Lin Feng was saying, and his eyes continued to grow more ferocious and bestial. So that's how it is, the Wolf King from the wolves of the desert must be an actual wolf. Lin Feng raised his deadly sword and firmly pointed it towards the Wolf King. Lin Feng's sword suddenly slashed towards the Wolf King at full speed. The Wolf King was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. He crouched to the floor and his hands started to transform into a pair of horrifying red claws which glistened in the sunlight. Die! Shouted Lin Feng. His deadly energy filled the air as his sword descended. Digger! The Wolf King let out a violent growl and launched himself from the back of his fire wolf. His speed was incredible. His red claws revealed their sharp edges as they slashed towards Lin Feng. Suddenly, a terrifying fire qi emerged from the claws which collided with Lin Feng's sword, causing a fiery explosion in the air. The sword qi started to disperse, leaving Lin Feng astonished. After having absorbed the power of his tribe members, the king had become unimaginably strong. At that moment, he had strength similar to the fourth Shen Qi layer. Ow! The Wolf King howled once again in a high-pitched tone and threw himself towards Lin Feng with all his might. Lin Feng was shocked. The Wolf King moved so fast that he seemed to vanish from sight. Lin Feng took a step forwards and a rumbling sound filled the air. Lin Feng released waves and waves of deadly energy into the air, but it hardly slowed the Wolf King's speed. Die! Shouted Lin Feng again. He continued to release more deadly energy with increased power. It then collided with the Wolf King's fire energy, which created a stalemate between the two energies. The atmosphere was filled with the sound of collisions as the energies continued to fight against each other to decide a victor. Die! Lin Feng's was surrounded by his deadly energy which was growing denser as he continued to release it into the atmosphere. The sword in his hand had started to turn a deeper shade of black. It looked ominous. Lin Feng didn't retreat, he continued to charge forwards. His pure qi had started to transform into deadly energy which bombarded the atmosphere, causing the Wolf King's heart to tremble. The bloodthirsty eyes of the Wolf King gradually revealed a look of surprise. Lin Feng's deadly energy was becoming denser and more powerful over time. Oh! The Wolf King howled again while looking to the sky. A sea of flames burst from his body and he threw himself towards Lin Feng, who was slashing down with his sword. Neither side was backing down, they were both pressing forwards gain. Two behemoths were clashing. Boom! 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 The atmosphere was shaking and shockwaves spread through the air each time the deadly energy and flames collided. It started to form a hurricane-like wind across the surroundings. All around them, the scenery was desolate. Everything in their surroundings had been completely destroyed. The people in the distance were surprised when they noticed their fight. How powerful! They were obviously surprised by the Wolf King's strength. But Lin Feng's strength surprised them even more. He was incredibly young and already had such a terrifying strength. Nona was especially astonished. She was standing on the eaves of a house while watching the Wolf King and Lin Feng's battle. Her mouth had grown completely dry, and she was unable to speak any words. It was too shocking. Lin Feng was even stronger than what she had imagined. It was inconceivable. At that moment, Nona looked perplexed. Even though Lin Feng had saved her from the second young master, her father had died and all the other members of the tribe were being exterminated. Even if her tribe initially wanted to deliver her to the enemy, she was still very close to many members of the tribe, and they were still her family. This calamity could have been avoided. Lin Feng's strength was sufficient to deal with the king of the wolves. If her father hadn't ordered people to act against Lin Feng, their relationship with Lin Feng wouldn't have deteriorated. After that, the tribe moved to kill Lin Feng because of the second young master. If they had welcomed Lin Feng and not acted against him, everything would have been different. Boom! Another collision caused the surroundings to shake, which interrupted Nuana's train of thought. She then turned her attention back to the fight. She only saw Lin Feng's sword slashing down. The Wolf King couldn't bear the pressure. He started to move back. Lin Feng's deadly energy was too frightening. On top of that, it continued to grow more powerful as more deadly energy was released by Lin Feng. It was incredibly scary. It never stopped growing in power. The Wolf King's ferocious eyes looked even more bestial than before. The king of the wolves of the desert was an actual wolf? Aya! A sharp scream filled the atmosphere. Nuana was the person who screamed out. When she saw the terrifying beast, she was overcome with terror. Her eyes were wide and filled with dread. Nuana wasn't the only one to react. The members of the wolves of the desert, they were ordinary people and were so shocked that they stopped moving. They were just blankly staring at the wolf surrounded by flames. A four-tailed wolf. Everyone at that moment thought about the same terrifying story which involved fire wolves. That story went back to ancient times. All the people watching had conflicting feelings, because they never believed that the story was anything but fiction. They didn't think such a thing was possible. The wolves of the desert. Desert. Wolves. When people thought about it, they couldn't help but tremble in fear. The name Wolves of the Desert had another meaning. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.